Hi, everyone. I'm going to start the meeting if that's okay, because we're at 7:07. I apologize for the room being really small, so I hope we all can make the best of it.
Can't hear you.
I'm sorry?
Can't hear you.
Oh, I can speak even louder. It's been a while. I'm Adam Crum. I'm the chair of the Narberth Planning Commission. I've been on the commission for a few years. It's May 5th, 7:08 p.m. And this is the regular monthly meeting of the Narberth Planning Commission. I am going to take attendance and then follow the agenda, and I will explain how the meeting will work and give everyone a chance to participate if they want to. So I'm first going to take attendance. I'm here. I'm Adam Crum. Is Aaron Graves here? Flight. Heidi Boyce here. Ralph Bierschwab
Here.
Todd Bressie
Here.
Brian Kinslow here. Jennifer Coney
Here.
and it's David Greenberg. Okay, and then I'll ask our staff to introduce themselves, please.
Mike Narquist, Community Planning System Manager.
Adam Shanks, Community Planner.
And we should say from Montgomery County Planning Commission too.
Yes.
Those are the members of the commission and the staff present. The order of the meeting is first announcements and updates, which we'll go through, and the approval of the minutes. And then we will open the meeting to public comment. And we'll run through the rules of the public comment, just in the interest of the number of people. If there's a lot of comments to make, then tonight we'll try to limit the period of time for any one person to speak, preferably to once, for no more than 3 minutes, if that's agreeable. And then there was a sign-in sheet so that we can keep track of anyone who does want to comment, so we can call on that person. I think it's still going around. Use the back if you're running out of space or anything like that, so we can make sure that everyone gets a chance. And then we will go to online. You would raise your hand in the Zoom meeting, and we can call on people in the Zoom meeting to speak as well. As a general, so just to begin, as a general update, I know there was on Facebook, someone posted that we were proposing 7-story buildings in Narberth, and that we were going to make it into 69th Street, which is a little offensive actually, but we are not actually here tonight to propose 7-story buildings in Narberth. The only thing under discussion is really keeping the height more or less the same as it is now. We have 3- and 4-story buildings. We're open to discussing, anything that people want to put on the table as a proposal. But at the moment, that's the framework that's being discussed. And if you want to think about conceptually what this is about, it's a couple different things, right? If, say, we have a building that burns down today, is it legal to rebuild that building, right? That's the zoning question. And it may sound simple, but there's some relatively minor technical things that can facilitate that or not. And then one of those things is parking that we'll talk about. The other is the form-based code, and specifically which district you're in and what the form-based principles are, and if there's any adjustments to that will make it work better. And then there's the context for planning in the borough, which is to say that, for example, the population has declined by 20% since 1950. So when there are 5 people in a neighborhood, in 1950, there are now 4 people. So we actually are supporting fewer people. And then we have, a sort of situation where we are under threat to lose our rail service, which is, would be a big downgrade, probably, in my opinion. And then we have essentially a lot of people concerned that we don't have enough housing options or affordable housing. So young people starting out, do they have the income to find, to be able to find a place to live, or people that are looking to downsize from a larger home to a smaller one at some point in their life. It's just a wide range of, do we have enough places for people to live in the borough, from people from all walks of life, basically. And we can't solve everything, but these are the things that people are asking to look at. So that's, we're talking about zoning, that's what we're looking to discuss this evening. And then specifically for one of the areas that we will focus eventually going around the entire sort of borough, if you will, in the commercial areas primarily. But I live on Elmwood Avenue, so we are actually talking about Elmwood Avenue, which is at the block next to the train station, basically the train station. In part because the historic church, which I enjoyed walking past for many years, and which you cannot build today because it is very high quality stonework and so on. We have lost that historic resource, right? And then now we have this vacant parcel, and we don't have very many opportunities like that in the borough. And we want to try to, shape our destiny a little bit, right? And try to, get the best that we can as a community. We may not all agree on exactly what that is, but at least have that discussion and do our best to go forward. So for the chair's update, real quick. Does anyone have any questions for me from the commission on any active topics? Okay. Jennifer put and circulated the meeting minutes from April 7th. Does anyone have any comments or corrections to the meeting minutes, the draft meeting minutes from last month?
Ralph had spelling check.
Yeah, a few updates I gave already to.
Okay, so Ralph has provided some spell check corrections to Jennifer. Any other changes? There's no comments. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt the April minutes?
Make motion to adopt.
For a second. Okay, it's been written by Commissioner Boyce and seconded by Ralph. All in favor of adopting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes are adopted. So
I'm going to abstain.
you want to abstain?
Yeah, I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay.
I'm not
The minutes show that Todd Bressi, Commissioner Bressi, has abstained from adopting the minutes as he was not present in April. He's traveling. Welcome back. And before we start the public comment, I just want to address one other thing about the Facebook post, since it named me personally. And then I have a stack of written public comments, and some people asked us to read them. I don't know if we should read every letter, but we can certainly speak to the written comments as well. And everyone's welcome to send written comments to council or to the planning commission. I do work for the railroad, and my wife also works for SEPTA. But we're not representing our employers, nor is there any business related to the railroad in this discussion. And I don't know what all of the other commissioners' jobs are, but they would recuse themselves from any topic they were voting on that was directly related to their employer. So we're all basically just citizen volunteers. And then I'm a former member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. I have a master's in city planning from Penn, and undergraduate in architecture from the University of Colorado. So, all right, so we're going to go 3 minutes. Do we have a list of people that would like to comment?
Oh, where's that list?
Yeah, sorry, I'm filling it out right now.
You can tear off the first sheet.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Adam, could you take a moment and just talk with people about what the planning commission is intended to do, who it's serving?
Yeah, well, so general education. So the planning commission they're appointed members from the city, the borough council, right? And they are here to take up topics related to general planning and also do research or work on behalf of the borough council on any topic that they request, right, that's related to planning. There are other commissions that do other functions as well. So we're not the Historic Architectural Research Resource Board, but we do liaise to them. We are not the Shade Tree Commission, not the Recreation Commission, and so on. And we are totally advisory in nature, but we do pass our recommendations on to council, and we do draw up proposals for council, and we do review development proposals. to commercial development and subdivision applications. So those would come to the planning commission for review and comment. And then, but the legislative action for anything that requires a government vote would go through borough council. It's the members of the commission come from various backgrounds, but most of them have some kind of connection to architecture or planning or public, civic activities related to community. So there are, I believe, 7 members and 1 alternate on staggered terms. And then we elect the chair and the vice chair and the secretary every year. So right now, we have been asked to look at a couple things. One is affordable housing or housing variety. And the sentiment being, that, well, for example, are the homes being constructed attainable to like an average person, or are they only for people with high incomes? That's one of the topics. Compatibility, right, with the community would be something to think about. We've also, the planning commission itself is, interested in providing recommendations or advice to support the general vitality of the community, such as the downtown business district. When I moved here, right, we still had a pharmacy, we had a Five and Dime, we had a hardware store, and we had a grocery store. Since that time, we've added some businesses, like we have the bookshop, and we have the pottery store, but we've lost quite a few businesses as well. And as you know, there is a proposal to redevelop some of the buildings downtown that is permitted, but it hasn't happened. And so we have, it's really great that people have made fantastic work, activating storefronts with art. But ultimately, there's a concern about keeping the business district going. I'm worried about it. Commissioners, any other things that you want us to mention of what we're working on? Todd, and then we'll go to Jennifer and then Don.
So first of all, I think it's important to be really super clear that anything we work on because council asks us to work on it. We don't make up stuff to work on. So every topic on our agenda is a topic that council has asked us to work on. And as Adam said, our role is to give advice.
Difficulty here, back here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So everything we see in our agenda,
Why can't you stand up when you speak so we can?
We're not gonna sit, we're gonna run the
We
meeting.
can't hear back here.
We're gonna do our best to raise our voice this time.
everything that's on our agenda, everything we work on because council has asked us to. So the topics tonight are things that last year we gave council a long list of topics that we were interested in, and council picked the topics that they felt we should be working on. So the topics we're talking about are topics that generally are ones that council has asked us to look at.
I'm sorry, because someone asked the question out here. Does that mean the council is the one that asked for affordable housing?
Council, what's the wording?
I have to pull
By
up.
the way, what council has asked us to do, you can look up on our records on the webpage. It's all.
You would know.
Oh, yeah.
You're.
why we're here to know about this.
Wait, you're right from the
I'm
horse.
not, I'm just telling, we will tell you, hey. I don't appreciate that. What I'm trying to tell you, a place where you can find information. We are not telling you we're not going to answer your question. I'm trying to tell you, you can also look it up. I don't appreciate that tone.
So
These things we do are posted on the internet.
leave that, huh?
I don't appreciate your tone, and I'm not leaving. I'm appointed.
No, I'm saying we should leave. No, we should.
We're going to answer your question.
Okay, guys,
But if
everyone,
you
time,
like,
okay,
you can look
we're
it
gonna
up
order,
on the
please.
internet.
Todd,
Letters the council,
Todd,
the council, the letters the council writes us and the letters we write them are posted on the internet. Now, I asked Adam to look that up for you.
it'll take me a minute. I'm not prepared to read back the letter right now.
Just to say, I think the reason that, this is being said is that, for instance, I didn't know any of this was going on, and I think it would be nice if council wants things done, or if there's a plan in coming in place, if there was some kind of notification for the residents. Because I just heard it, I just saw it on a poster and somebody just texted me, oh, this is happening. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known, like, I'm not always, I wouldn't even know to check the website. So I think there's a communication piece between the residents and council or you or whomever. I'm not coming down on anybody. It's just that this stuff is happening to us and we don't even know about it. You know, it should be like when the form-based zoning came about, you know, there was meetings, we were notified, and these changes.
Ma'am, what is your name?
My name's Catherine Costa. So anyways,
Spell it for me, please.
Katherine Costa, Costa. And I'm a registered architect, whatever that's worth.
So, Ms. Costa, I can let you finish, but we have a choice, right? Because if we go free form, that may be the best thing to do,
No, I know.
but I mean, it might be, or we can go individually, but I don't know what would be the most productive, so I want to capture your comment.
I really don't, but I just wanted, that's what I think, you know, this friction's about.
Very good, thank you.
Again, I want to ask those assembled, right? Like, if we just call on hand, we could just go around and call on hands. Again, we have to limit people to 3 minutes, so I prefer we can only call on you once, or we can go through and let you make a formal question or statement. Can I get a show of hands if you would just prefer that we call on you one by one if you raise your hands, or if you would like us to go through the list? So all in favor of call on, raise your hand and we'll call on you once. Raise your hand now. I see 3 or 4 hands. Those in favor of we'll go through name by name, raise your hand. Okay, so the majority of people would prefer that we will just follow that system, and we'll try to exhaust the opportunity to comment, but I just want to basically give everyone a chance.
You did a great job on the Gen Ed thing, explaining the commission in relation to the borough council, but there's 2 Montgomery County Planning Commission people in attendance here. So what's the waterfall really when it comes to the county overlay, with the township, with the borough, and who's the governing body here?
What the county reviews development proposals for conformance to the plan, like the comprehensive plan, the county's plan, and they provide letters of comment. It's non-binding. And then the borough, my understanding, contracts with the county to provide a planner or planners as technical support, maps, research, they can help write ordinances, those kinds of things. So they're basically contracted staff that are for hire, and and then formally the county reviews development applications. And they help us liaise to the township and to the larger, other governmental units. We also have staff that when developers file, or applicants, I should say, they're not all developers, many of them are homeowners. If you file something for review, the staff will review it for compliance with the zoning code. The borough engineer and the zoning officer will review it, and they provide letters to essentially the borough, so to the commission and to council if it's going to go to a vote. And then ultimately, like I said, council is the legislative body, so anything that needs to be voted on gets voted on by council. That's the definite action of the government. So they're just here as essentially staff that are for hire, and that's their role, really. All right, so I'm going to call on the first name, if that's okay. And we'll try to do 3 minutes, if that works.
What there are other letter from the council president. Do you want to put it up on the screen so people can see it?
Are you able to pull it up?
Yeah, I have it right here. I look at the letter.
Are you in the meeting?
I am in the meeting.
Emily, can you let Todd present the letter? Please.
For something else.
Let me know.
There's still a chance for it.
There's a blank one, you pass this down.
Weren't there two other commissioners that wish to speak in the introductory period?
There are, I'm just trying to keep it moving, I mean,
Todd's gonna clarify.
Can you see that now? Let me make it bigger.
while we're waiting, I will just tell you, I've been your chair before, like before I was on the commission. And maybe I was activated by Facebook, I'm not sure, and it was like, they're gonna tear down downtown. And I showed up, we moved the meeting to the other room, Todd was chair, I think, because there were so many people that showed up to prevent the downtown from being torn down. And Todd talked us off the wedge. Now, ultimately, for lots of reasons, there is an entitlement to, redevelop part of the town, but we had a very, respectful conversation. We listened to people, we heard from the commission. I felt a little bit better after that, but I showed up really worried, right? That because I really left the town. So.
If you use the downtown as an example of commission work and things that are reviewed and commented on by the commission for the benefit of Borough Council, how was that, that's the largest land transfer in the last 100 years in Narberth, right?
I don't know about that, but
Well, I mean, the business district, right? Half of it was sold. Was there any involvement in all the things that you're involved in now?
so the planning commission's role, since I've been on it, has just been to review the development application that already happened. I joined after all that happened, so.
That seemed to be like a planning thing that got missed, right?
I mean, ultimately, the thing about this is all private property, and so this is very much about,
It's all private.
it's all, well, except for this building and things like that, yeah. So Todd's got the letter this is the letter from Borough Council. And
Last July.
this is asking us for our annual work program.
So it's hard to see, but I can't make it any bigger. But again, you can find this in our records. But what it says is the council supports both affordable housing and transit-oriented infill development and welcomes MPC and MCPC attention to this issue. We feel the zoning rules for 5A have generally led to significant and positive investments in Narberth's future, transit-oriented infill development, and instead of focused attention on that district, suggest to look at other areas of the code. In particular, we believe our current zoning standards for use and standards for site plans do not do a good job of reflecting our existing housing, with most of the properties in some zoning districts being non-conforming in areas like lot size, lot width, or setbacks. The zoning should permit the type of buildings that have given Narberth its character, and we believe NPC and MCPC attention would be helpful. NPC should also consider whether the collar areas they have identified should be incorporated into the 5A district to better reflect their integration into the downtown core. And what collar areas refers to are the areas right on the edge of the 5A district.
Is it on the other side of the tracks as well? Narberth, is that also?
So the block facing the train station has a different zoning than, say, the rest of Elmwood, basically. It's only that block facing the train station on Elmwood, the rest of the south side is, I think, more or less one.
This is their agenda. The rest of the south side is what?
Well, so you can, if you Google the Narberth zoning map, you can find it online. South side is zoned 3B, mixed residential limited. So I believe that's things like twin houses and single family homes. The block facing the train station is 4A, general urban limited, which is part of the collar area that was being referred to. So the core of downtown is 5A downtown. So we have this downtown zoning, which is mixed use zoning. And in other words, it's intended to promote commercial business like ground floor retail in particular, but mixed use. So with other uses above that, the storefronts. That's the downtown zoning. And then around the downtown is this general urban limited, which is a little bit more high density than the other parts of town, but not as much as downtown. And then we also have 4B, general urban open. That's, for example, the part of town that includes the row houses. We also have 5B zoning, which is commercial zoning on Montgomery Avenue. And then we have finally lower density 3A zone, which is like Linwood Avenue and part of Montgomery Avenue. So basically larger lots.
What part of Montgomery?
From Stepney west, like sort of around Stepney and then up to the corner with Linwood. The corner of Linwood has an apartment building that's actually zone 3C, mixed residential open. And then we have sort of where St. Margaret's, that there's a loop around town as well that's zoned 3C. We can show you the zoning map. And essentially, it's just in each zone, there's some rules related to setbacks, density, types of buildings you can build, and frontages, how the building engages the street. That's basically all the zoning does. So when they talk about non-conforming, the question would be, if something happened to Narberth, could you put it back? If you can't, that means that what you have on the parcel today is not conforming to the zoning. And you may say, well, gee, they're dumb. They can't write better zoning. And we're trying, right, as a town. But, like this town, many of these things were built without zoning or different kinds of zoning. And, like not necessarily write laws to replicate history. And then the other thing is that, for example, parking, the town was built before automobiles in many cases. And so when we try to say, well, but the town needs to accommodate everyone having multiple automobiles, that's not the way the town's built, right? Every car, every parking space is about 250 square feet of ground, when all is said and done. So every time we add a parking space, that's how much ground we need. And so I just understand, so that's when we say non-conforming, when council's like, A, are we meeting our goals for providing, development for the community, housing and so on. And B, are we, is the zoning tailored to the look and feel and the way the town actually is? Right, the way that, and I think we should leave room for improvement, not to put it under a glass dome and say it's perfect, but forever trying to make it even more perfect. So that's the letter from council. And although Todd says we do work at the direction of council, we do, we also reserve the right to essentially, act in good faith, if you will, to bring topics to the council if they're relevant. So. All right.
We need to show zoning, right?
Would you want, Emily, am I still in a meeting? Is the meeting still running?
It is.
Yeah. I can share the zoning map if you want. That's the zoning map. So we zoom in. The purple is the downtown. And north is up. This is the train station. These are essentially, this is where the church was. It's been torn down. The church would have been non-conforming in terms of setbacks and parking. Right? Didn't have any parking. Didn't have any setbacks on part of the lines. It's the rest of the block is multifamily. I think it's more than one family per lot. And then around the downtown, this green area is the collar area. And then we kind of have this, we also have this yellow shape that you can see captures many of the apartment buildings that are built to the north of downtown. This later development is in red. That's the 3A along Linwood. And the blue here on Woodbine with row house style, so zero lot line development, meaning you don't have any side setback and you have village housing. And then we have the commercial zoning along there. So we have a process coming up.
Having trouble hearing, I'm so sorry.
But we hopefully have a process coming up, I mean, in terms of like outreach to the community and so on. The township has a grant to plan the transportation corridor of Montgomery Avenue, which is under the township's control, but we're a partner in the grant. And, we obviously would like Montgomery Avenue to be better. So there was an opportunity, hopefully, for the public and everyone else to, work to come up with a plan for Montgomery Avenue. So we'll see going forward. All right, any other, I have one more question?
What's the dark yellow that's most of South Harbor on the map?
It's 3B.
Which is?
It's a zoning category. So the zoning code, you can Google it, Narberth zoning code. And it's a little bit, I find it not super easy to read, but in other words, it's a municipal ordinance. So it's on the ordinance website, but it will describe the uses that you can put. Zoning governs what you're allowed to use the lot for, the setbacks, how far from the lot line your structure has to be, the frontage you can have on your structure facing the street, and the height limit of the structure, and the number of housing units, in some cases is controlled, right? How many housing units you can have on the parcel.
Lot coverage too.
Lot coverage is part of it, and impervious is another measure. So lot coverage is how much open ground there is, and impervious is how much of that open ground would allow water to infiltrate into the ground. And there's probably other things. There's a lot of sort of technical standards that basically guide how development would happen if you try to build something.
Did you mention parking?
Yeah, so I'd have to look and see what the parking requirement is exactly in 3B. But it does control parking.
So using that as an example.
Should we proceed with the agenda? Does everyone agree that what we're doing now is the most valuable thing we could be doing with this time? Sure.
I think these are great examples that we can walk to and everybody knows about them. So the five houses of Rockland and Marion, how did that happen related to parking? You're assuming that.
Look, actually, we're not, well, I'll just mention that, I don't have everything memorized, right? But many developments will provide off-street parking, right? So that the borough will control, like how many curb cuts you can have and how wide they should be. And may require you to provide off-street parking in some cases. But, again, like part of the challenge is, does it all fit on the property? So, all right, so I have a list just to manage expectations. There are 34 names on the list. And if we took 3 minutes for every person, right?
2 minutes.
Two minutes.
We also had hands on Zoom earlier because we have 35 people promoting.
How many hands on Zoom do we have?
There were a few and then they're popping up again.
So we'll just, for now, I call it as 5, right? So if let's just say we have 40 people total. So if everyone speaks for 2 minutes and only 2 minutes, it will be 80 minutes.
You said 3 at the beginning.
I did, so we can, if everyone speaks for 3 minutes, it would be 2 hours and comments. We want 3 minutes, everyone?
No.
So if we call on you and you want to pass, you're free to pass. But
Just started.
all right, so Emily Stewart, 112 Avon Road.
Hi, everybody.
Please stop
Alex?
sharing the screen. I'm sorry.
Okay, should I stand or sit?
You may stand, feel free.
All right, I'm gonna stand, I don't know where to stand, I'm gonna stand over here. I live at 112 Avon Road, you may know that is not in the borough. I am 6 houses outside the borough. But I am a stakeholder and I am very involved in the community. I'm the coordinator of Norwood Public Art. I spend a ton of time talking to people, developing collaborations and putting art in our vacant windows. I want you to think just for a second about what you love most about this town. What makes Norwood? And I think if you think about that, you're gonna have a long list, but it probably includes the cute architecture and the walkable streets and the shade canopy and our hokey calendar of family events. But I bet most of us, at the top of our list, it's the people. It's the relationships we've built here. And we have a very tight-knit town because we live like real close to each other. We don't have a lot of space. Sometimes we give up our privacy. I'm not the only one who dreams of having a bigger yard and garden, but what we benefit from having this tiny community of little properties and houses close together is the community that we built. When you walk out of your house, you cannot help but interact with your neighbor. You cannot help but meet people when you walk into town or bike into town or stand on the train waiting for the train to come, which sometimes takes forever. This is how we develop relationships. When we leave our houses and we go into our cars, well, we're taking our private space on the road with us. I believe that the nature of this town is truly benefited by this transit-oriented forms of transportation, and in addition, by the ability for us to move around our communities in the way that we share space. Americans, as you probably know, are communicating online more and more. This is social media, this is Zoom, it's Facebook. We are less connected than in any other generation. And the consequences are devastating, especially for our young people. Anxiety, depression, isolation is skyrocketing. But in Narberth, we can actually do things differently. We can do things differently because we have that tight-knit community. And feeling connected is essential. Our children play at the playground together. They build life skills like negotiation and collaboration and emotional regulation that they will use for the rest of their lives. Adolescents connect in person here because this neighborhood is safe and it is walkable. And they can support each other through the vulnerable years of growing and changing. Young parents who often feel very isolated with the chaos of raising little kids can connect to other parents at the playground. Adults can partner together and form collaborations. That's the stage of life I'm in. I love being able to go downtown and meet new people and chance running into people and those relationships develop. Seniors who can no longer drive benefit from this transit-oriented, walkable neighborhood. People that are disabled, people that are hearing impaired and sight impaired can also, if they can't drive, can live in a community that is transit-oriented. Lastly, Narberth has existed before and it will continue to outlive us. I hope that the values of inclusivity can continue to be passed on to our children so that they can inherit this wonderful community. I really believe everyone's voice here matters and that we all can collaborate and we can do both. We can move forward while we honor our history. Thank you.
All right, it's Sammy Nichols, 418 Conway Avenue, 3 minutes.
All right, I'll keep it brief. First, Sammy Nichols, 418 Conway. First, I wanted to thank the Planning Commission for taking up this topic. It's important work and all of you have families and jobs and actual lives, and yet you've chosen to volunteer your time and energy to do the hard work serving Narberth, and it's greatly appreciated. I fully support the idea of allowing a fourth story and reduced parking across the street from the train station. I love Narberth. I love being able to walk to our local businesses. I love being able to take the train and bus. I love going on walks around town and meeting new people. And I want to welcome new neighbors who can help us continue to support all of these things so that when I have kids in the next couple of years, I can give them an Narberth with walkable businesses, self-service, community events, and well-maintained parks. I know that growth can be hard, but that's why we have a planning commission to help us make those hard choices in the best interest of the entire community. The real threat, in my opinion, is not one additional story on a building or a couple fewer parking spaces. Both of these things already exist around Narberth and have existed here for 100 years. The real threat is that we give our kids a Narberth that doesn't have a place for them, that tries to build walls instead of homes, that says it wants a train in downtown, but not if it means more riders and more customers. That's the real threat here. So thank you to the Planning Commission for taking this up and for being stewards of all things that we love about Narberth.
Med Mahmood,
That's me.
214 Price Avenue.
Hello, my name is Med. I'm from the Montgomery Court Apartments. I've got essentially two things that I really like about the transit-oriented development. One is that it's going to encourage like a vibrant downtown area because we'll have more people and more revenue. And I also like discouraging people from going into little isolated car bubbles and traveling around in isolation. And I would like to encourage transit and walkability. And having a building very, very close to the train station that would prefer you take the train than drive your car and supports a larger number of people in them of a variety of income levels seems like a pretty natural way to do it. I'm curious to hear what the objections are. It seems very straightforward to me, but that's all. I'm going to yield my time.
Okay, that was only 30 seconds. Thank you. David Bartow, Chestnut Avenue.
Sure. I want to for Chestnut Avenue. A couple things. One, the last meeting, you had mentioned something about a white paper, the document on housing provided to planning commission members. Just moving forward, if you can just include everything for the public to see in the planning in the packets for everyone. In the last meeting,
Understood. I mean, I know in this case that MCPC did provide in the packet in the.
Yeah, I meant last meeting. And then in the comprehensive plan, I guess ensure safe, efficient and safe. Ensure safe and efficient circulation throughout the borough was listed as a high priority to complete in 0 to 5 years. So I think one of the things to give consideration to is if you move forward with this is making sure we have the proper traffic audit. And one of the other things in the parking task force got together, they said typically developers and municipalities are often required to submit traffic impact studies to estimate additional vehicle volumes that their proposal will add to local roadways and to account for any local infrastructure improvements. So I have to keep that in consideration if you move forward with something like this. In particular, if it's before the bridge gets open again.
Okay.
Well, there's usually 2 seconds you said for public comment. Will be a second.
Sorry?
Will be a second opportunity.
Yeah, on the agenda, we do offer one. Yes, there will be at the end of the meeting if you still want to, yes.
Thank you.
All right, so Daniel, I can't read the last name, H from Dudley Avenue? Or is it Daniel or Danielle? Anyone from Dudley Avenue here?
Pass.
Christine Condo, 401 South Narberth Avenue. Christine?
I'll pass.
Dolly
Monroe.
Monroe, 413 Grove Place.
I have a question. If you and your wife work for SEPTA, and we always hear it's SEPTA that keeps the bridge closed, and then there's Narberth that keeps the bridge closed.
It's for Amtrak.
His wife works for something.
His wife works for SEPTA.
It's an accident, it's not my fault.
Isn't there some light that can be shed on opening the bridge? That's because I think when you talk about drowning out all the business in Narberth, when you close a major artery, of course that's going to impact the businesses in Narberth, and that was a pretty major artery there. That was closed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just.
I don't have a lot of information on the bridge, but I will say that.
Why is there no concern to ever open the bridge?
What I was told by the borough manager, it was super exciting, is that finally the drawings were put out for bid by PennDOT. So that's all I know, and I'm just repeating it, right? So the project has been approved, if you will. It's with PennDOT to find a contractor, and so hopefully that project will proceed.
Because maybe a lot of business could thrive in Narberth if that artery were open. And we wouldn't need to build so much. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, it is. I think it takes 10 minutes longer to get to work in the morning because of that bridge space source. That's just as common sense today.
Okay.
That's just me.
Only 12 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only 12 years.
John Monroe?
Yeah. There are numerous comments I'd like to make about the general meeting tonight, but two that stand out to me that I feel like I need to address. The first is the narrative that's being put forward for the approval of changing the zoning. It was mentioned at the top. I'm 23, I graduated college 2 years ago. Affordability is top of mind for me. And one of the things that was said was that we need to make these changes so that there's more housing types allowed in the borough, so it's more affordable for more people, specifically young people who may want to stay in place. And so I just want to bring back into focus what we're actually talking about here and what's really being proposed. It's a zoning reform. It's not going to do anything for people my age who can't move here, not until we're 50. This has been tried in hundreds of cities across the country, and you just get new units, and they're unaffordable. It doesn't work. There is no serious proposal for immediate cost relief. No rent control, no registration of landlords, no regulations. There's no government intervention. It's deregulation. It's a ploy. It's profit seeking. It's a ploy. This is snake oil. This has nothing to do with anybody my age, anybody poor, any of our well-being. It is not going to benefit us. It's not going to keep us here. It's helping landlords and developers. It's the YIMBY movement. It's snake oil. And it came right out of the Cato Institute. It's not progressive. The second thing is, excuse me. At the top, you also mentioned, you've been clear that you work for Amtrak, and your wife works for SEPTA. And you did say that if there was a direct conflict of interest with what you do on the commission and what you do for a living, you and the other members would recuse yourself. So I would just like to point out that I believe you are the chairman of the planning commission, and your title at Amtrak is the director of planning. So I don't understand how it could be any more aligned than that. So if that doesn't count, if that doesn't warrant refusal, I don't think anything will. Thank you.
I'm just going to address that since it's about me personally, right? And so if there's an architect on the commission, doesn't mean they can't visit architecture. So my job is about trains. But yeah, if we zone the train station, that's technically railroad property, for example. But I'm not here representing my employer, and there's nothing my employer has going on here. And as far as the bridge, I am not involved with the bridge. I'm another user of the bridge. So my wife does work for SEPTA. She's not on the commission, and to be candid, she's trying to save the rail service from obliteration, which will be pretty bad for us, and pretty bad for the Commonwealth. So that's us personally. So I will go to Lee Hawkinson, 203 Wayne Avenue.
I just want to represent not 23, but I'll be 42 this week, and I am the middle income single mother teacher who you are trying to also keep Narberth affordable for. I don't think anything you're doing or proposing benefits me. In fact, I worry about the value of my property. I know some of you may be in a position to make money and move. I'm not. This is what I give my kids. I give them my home. I give them the shaded parks. I give them this community. And I don't like what's happening here. And it scares me for my future and what we can give back to the future generations. I work with kids, and we really need to think about how we're going to sleep at night if we move forward with some of these ludicrous plans.
You. Stephanie.
You don't have to say it.
Is it 25 state line?
Yeah, I guess I have a couple questions, and this might be somewhere, but I thought maybe other people got to hear it. I want to talk from a business perspective. I'm curious with the proposed plans. I know that there are studies about Glenside and Black over in Ardmore. I went through the revitalization of Ardmore,
and I had to close my business there. So I'm just really curious, what's gonna be discovered and looked at, or whatever words you wanna use for it, with the plan, because I'm also a SEPTA rider. My son is a high school student, he's a SEPTA rider. He takes the train to and from school. We want the railway, we want the businesses, the walkability, everything that everyone else wants. I'm just curious, what is gonna be researched on what businesses, went under and what business survived? Because when you go through a huge revitalization of a downtown, I don't know if those businesses there can take 3 years or whatever it is of people not being able to park or people not being able to go to their businesses, or do they have 5 years? I put up 5 years in a contract of my personal assets to be able to sign my contract in Ardmore. And I went to the very end of it and then I needed to leave because I was literally out of money. So all of the utilities that got closed, all the people that run it for me in the co-working space that wanted to go, we were really excited for everything. And, Ardmore as it is now has all the cool restaurants and everyone's super excited about what's happening there now. I'm just curious, what's going to be compared, and also what do the business owners think about it now? I mean, I don't have a brick and mortar on Haverford, but I would think that would be a huge concern of theirs. And I know we say we love everybody that lives here, and we want more people to come in, but I definitely think there needs to be a focus on the people that are here with us now, not going anywhere.
Thank you.
Constance, you don't have to say the last name either. It's Micah, MHAKA. Okay, so full disclosure, when that sheet went around, I thought it was an attendance sheet. I work for education, and a sheet goes around, I sign it. So, okay, but since I have a couple seconds, I learned a lot of things already. Like when I walked in, if I gave you guys a stink eye, it's because I thought all of you were pushing this on Narberth, on us. And so what I heard this morning that, that you got information from Borough Council, and this was your kind of your mandate or your, go forth and do this and have everybody mad at you and no one mad at Borough Council. Full disclosure, again, I didn't vote for anybody on Borough Council. And those of you who did, you need to kind of police them, because I'm an independent and there hasn't been a good independent candidate in this borough for, 10, 15, 20 years. So do your job and make sure that because you're going to get what you vote for. Affordable housing, that's hilarious. So my husband and I, we scrimped and saved. We lived in South Philly. He worked for the VA. I worked for education. And it was always above, somebody in my position's reach. Okay, but we managed and we saved, like a lot of you here saved because you wanted to live. Narberth was like Mayberry, and it was a dream. And we love it. And we've been here over 27 years. But I will tell you that houses that are going for sale, people in their 20s, 30s are buying houses in my neighborhood that are over almost $2 million. So, and they go within 2 days. So I don't know, I don't understand this all talk about affordable, because like you, this is not going to make things affordable.
No,
And then
I make it worse.
And then open space. Does anybody just look at that lot or a lot, an open lot, and say, hey, here's a green space. Can we put a garden here?
Yes.
And make a wildlife, I don't know, whatever. But does anybody do that, or does everybody on Borough Council look at a space and say, ooh, we can build 50 apartments? So that is the problem. I'm sorry, again, if I gave you guys a stink eye, it's not you, but really all of us in Narberth have to start looking out who we're voting for and make sure that they know that we have eyes on them. Yeah. Yes.
Can I just make one quick comment to that, please?
No.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to mention Elm Grove Park that we added that.
Yes,
Say.
yes.
Yeah.
That,
That's all I wanted to say, yes.
incidentally, so my understanding is the borough, if we're talking at the end of the Elmwood Street.
Yes, Elm Grove Park.
The borough purchased that property, which was proposed for.
Supposed to be developed.
Yeah, so great, there should be more.
I have Rob Zagrebi, 518 Narberth Avenue.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Rob Zagrebi. I was on Borough Council for 5 years and I'm listening to what everyone's saying. I mean, I think I learned a lot serving on the Borough Council. I'm not a trained planner. And I really appreciated the Planning Commission's expertise, the architects and the planners and all of you. You do a lot of work, detailed work in advising the council. So your work is appreciated. One of the things that I learned is that the borough needs more revenue. You know, so in my term, we realized that with some of the new development, we had opportunities to capture more revenue for the borough. If we couldn't do that, then we would have to raise taxes higher than they've been raised, or we'd have to reduce services. So the reality is we can't really stay still. We have to either allow for more development so that we can capture taxes, or we have to be willing to pay more ourselves. I mean, that's something that I did not know until I served on President Council. This community has been transit-oriented development before that term was even coined. We were built before the Model T. You know, so some of our garages are so tiny that we can barely fit a Honda Civic. And some of our driveways are shared. So it makes sense to me that, you know, apartments in this particular location, it's next to another apartment building. It's not out of step with the immediate surroundings. And it does allow for more people to live in the borough. I also want to just comment, I agree with my neighbor on affordable housing. I would love to see affordable housing. It does seem unlikely that it would be in this development, just like it's not happening in Jenny's ice cream building, or, you know, I wish there could be a way, if there was some sort of bonus, like a fourth, whatever it is. We did this with green zoning where we had a fourth floor bonus that could be allowed if they made an all-electric building, or if there was some sort of concession from the developer. I wish that there could be something like that for below market rent apartments. The most direct way to provide that amenity to this community, which desperately needs it, given the prices of these houses, is on borough-owned property, which would be at Sabine. It wouldn't be at this property because we don't own it. If we wanted to buy this property, we would have to pay $1 million, or the Elmwood property, we'd have to pay $1 million or $2 million to buy it. That's what where the old church was.
You're talking about Sabine Park?
No, right now I'm talking about Elmwood.
Elmwood and
Yeah, we have to buy it, just like with the Elmwood Road. We bought that, right? We were able to find a grant for $500,000 and we were able to match that. And that's how we prevented the development of what it was, maybe 12, 20 townhouses that were going to go in right on Wynwood Avenue. So the only way to disrupt the market force is to actually buy it as a municipal property. And that takes a lot of money, you know, it could take grants. But that could then eventually provide for affordable housing.
Thank you. Walter McDonough, 9 Elmwood Avenue.
Yes, my name is Walter McDonough. I live on Elmwood Avenue. And let me start by saying I'm certainly not opposed to a transit-oriented development. As been pointed out, Narberth has always been a transit-oriented community. My wife and I moved here because we both worked in the city and we wanted to be convenient and wanted to be close to the train station. We live right down the street from the train station. So it's great to have those amenities. But I would ask the commission to look at the scale. I think the development is a good idea, but it's really a question of scale. So I would ask you to exercise caution in evaluating what impact any new development is going to have on the community, on parking, on traffic, on, you know, just being able to go down the streets. But another thing I'd like to point out is I think there should be more of an emphasis on what's going on downtown in the business district. I don't know if that's your purview or not, but I know from a prior meeting, someone said, well, the businesses are struggling, and that's because we don't have enough people. We used to have 5,000 people, now we have 4,000 people. And if we put in more housing, it'll help the businesses. I disagree with that. I think the businesses are struggling because it looks like it's been bombed out. And there's no, I mean, you know better than I do. I don't know what's going on to encourage the developer to get something done. Narberth used to be kind of we had anchor stores. We had a reason to come downtown. We had Mapes, we had Ripplin's, we had the American Family, we had a pharmacy. Now, you know, I don't want to live in the past. I know those things are gone, and I know there are lots of reasons why they're gone. But I think that's one of the reasons that the businesses are in fact doing badly. It's because there's no reason for someone who doesn't live in Narberth to come downtown. And until that other side of Haverford Avenue is developed, there's going to be less of a reason.
Red Christmas, 105 Elmwood Avenue.
All right, that Griffith, I agree with what Walt just said, you know. I mean, I've lived here with my family over 54 years. So we've seen it change. I mean, it's not good. I just hope that you can reconcile this whole, whatever's going on, that we don't go sky high and get nothing but 5,000 people living here and nowhere to go. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Christmas. Sue Sproul, 400 South Narberth Avenue.
I just want to say, also, in line with what Walter was saying, I listened to the meeting last month, and the idea of increasing housing to offset a declining population was misguided to me. I mean, people are having fewer kids. We're not going to change that by adding more, 30 more units, apartments. And I also think that that's not the way to solve downtown. Being slower, revenues are less. We have at least five empty storefronts. And I think getting stores in there that are attractive and diverse is really what we should be trying to accomplish if we want to help downtown. And I also want to say, please, when you're taking zoning into consideration, think about people who live here now and their enjoyment of the neighborhood. The setbacks are there for a reason. Parking regulations, the number of parking units necessary are there for a reason. The height of the buildings for a reason. It's about the character and it's about the enjoyment of the neighborhood. And I hate for that to be spoiled. And I ask you to keep that in your minds when you're making your recommendations.
Thank you. Kathy Burns.
I agree with Sue.
Thank you. Betsy Harvey, 207 Marion Avenue.
Yeah, I echo many of the neighbors who are concerned about this in terms of population density, how that affects traffic, infrastructure, plumbing under streets. I don't know about you guys, but I worry about my sewer pipe on an almost regular basis. I probably should bite the bullet and replace it, but like if you start, that's very minutia, but I guess when it really comes down to it, I think that we are in an illusion if we think people will not have cars on the main line. I'm just gonna say that. I know there are a lot of people that disagree with me, but if you do have children, whether they are artists, whether they are scientists, whether they are athletes, your lessons are not in Narberth, they are somewhere else, and they are not accessible by a train. So this idea that we would have a high density structure with minimal parking means that street parking increases. And we already have a traffic problem because I'm on the south side, we don't have a bridge. And bridge or no bridge, you can take which side of that you want, whether you want it back or want it. But at the end of the day, the high density approach, I think, is short-sighted, especially if you go with the period of we build it and they will come, then let's work on
doing all the things that Emily's talking about. She does a beautiful job of our infrastructure, but I think that we have to build businesses that are viable. Let's get back at some form of a pharmacy, if that can even ever happen again, or some form of a grocery or market. Let's build it and sustain this, because I think all of our community and our people will go and serve these things. I like Little Farmers Market. It doesn't work for my schedule, but what if I could go and get all of my flowers and my groceries and not use my car? That's great. But at the end of the day, we don't have that, you guys. And I think we are misprioritized. And I'm also a little concerned that in previous meetings in 2024, there was the majority of people wanted to focus on the downtown business district. And one person, Tim Staub, is the one that said we have to focus on housing. And here we are today, which means either we're not listening, voting right, or something's just terribly off form in terms of communications. We're better than this, Narberth. We're so much better than this. Let's do this well. And let's do this thoughtfully. And let's have a better infrastructure before we just go down an idealistic pipe dream that is just completely impossible to fulfill. And we will end up with empty businesses, empty apartments, and other things with all these people all around us unless we focus on making the main thing, which is we got to fix our town.
Thank you. James Mullins, 119 Woodside Avenue.
Jim Mullins.
Jim.
Mine's gonna be fairly short. I basically agree with quite a few things that were noted before. I don't know necessarily the snake oil, but I don't think you guys want generating that stuff. But I do think you really need to think about what kind of structures we're talking about. And I also agree that, geez, you start building larger and larger buildings. Okay, yeah, we're adding one story. Oh, now we're gonna add another story. And it keeps on going. It doesn't stop. So let's keep those things down. And let's not think of just that. Let's not take, the blinders on, put them on, and just, it's rentals only. I think part of Narberth is people owning something, not just rent. And please, renters, take this gently. But renters, great people, the thing is, they're still looking for somewhere else to go. They're looking for something else. And when it comes up, they're gone. And you kind of wonder, hey, who voted these people in? Well, we start diluting out who actually lives here and kind of owns a piece of this place. That is a big difference. So please think about condominiums might be a really good answer. It offers some density, but the other thing is what's going to be stopping this is that isn't real profitable because you just sold that thing. It's no longer my constant revenue, which unfortunately, that's what we're all being focused on at this point. Let's think about those permanent structures that are then something people take care of. They have ownership in this town. So please, Planning Commission, think about that. That should be one of my opinion, and maybe others, that should be right on the top. Ownership really drives pride and really want to drive a wonderful town. Thank you.
Next is Nancy Mullins, also from 119 Woodside.
I agree with a lot of what I've heard. One of the things that I've talked to a few homeowners in Narberth about is Jim and I moved here from a small town in North Carolina called Davidson. Davidson College is basically the main thing happening there. And when we moved into that town, it was a dry town. We drive through on Saturday night at 9 o'clock and there was nothing happening. And we saw it evolve with strong leadership, with people on mayor and council deciding what direction they wanted that town to go. And they had one person that owned most of the old storefront. And they were very selective who they brought in when he decided he was going to sell this little storefront and that little storefront. And they dictated what they were doing. I'm not sure, this seems to be missing in Narberth. The first thing that Jim and I noticed when we moved here is, where's the sense of direction for what the downtown could be? Is there a dream? Are there goals in place for what downtown could be? It seems like we're letting everybody else tell Narberth what they could be as opposed to Narberth deciding
this is what we want. We've noticed this already with our own home, with developers, and people that come into Narberth and are allowed to dictate what they're gonna do. And as a homeowner, if we wanted to do that to our house, we have to pay extra money to get that variance on that permit. So, you know, the developers are allowed to come in and make their choices because they have the money. I'm tired of seeing developers come in and do it. They're going to some of the older homes and just, you know, even possibly what can happen in downtown with the 4 floors, which would, I think, be a huge mistake. That's all I have to say.
Snyder, 203 Chestnut Avenue.
He passed, he left.
Did Liz, Brad?
Renzi. I guess first I'll just say, it seems like one of the main things that you're tasked to look at is should you allow 4 stories in taller areas? And I would put in my vote for no, or my opinion for no. I do think it makes a difference. I care about the environment and all that, but I think it makes it, and I know that that's a concern of, you know, have more density so it's better for the environment. But I think it's worse as far as the walkability, livability, and lovability of Narberth. It makes the buildings more monolithic, and so both on Haverford Avenue and in the Elmwood, where the church was, I would say, please don't allow 4 stories. I would also say that the bigger the apartment buildings, well, I'd like to, I don't see any evidence. I'd like to know if there is evidence that they do create affordable housing for people. All I can see, and maybe there is that evidence, but I just don't know it. But all I can see is that they make the area seem more monolithic, less unique, less fun to walk through, and that ultimately, and that the businesses that can go in under these places are not the mom and pop and unique places that made Narberth so great and made us move here. And I fear that Narberth will become, look like everywhere else and have the same type of businesses as everywhere else. And I think those big buildings, the bigger the building, the more that encourages that we lose the uniqueness. And I hear you, or I hear some people that revenue is a problem. That's a reason to add, more stories and more people. You need to, I think the citizens need to hear more about this, more about what the real problems are with revenue and what the choices are. And, how much you have to raise taxes to prevent, versus getting X more, hopefully tax revenue from more building. And if the developers won't, and I understand council has no control over private property and what developers want to develop there. And if it's the truth that developers won't build 3-story buildings and they'll just remain empty, then we need to hear about that. We don't have any way to know if that's the truth, or or other situations where it's private property and you can't do anything about it. We need to understand more about that and about what you can do and can't do.
Thank you. That's expiring.
Forgot something.
Angus Flood, 201 Woodside Avenue.
Hi, we're on Woodside and Essex, and we've been here from '87. And over the years, cars would stream down Woodside Avenue and Essex, and once that bridge was closed, we don't see any fender benders on our corner anymore. We see kids playing in the street, playing, basketball, street hockey. On Woodside, you see it on Essex, and the kids are going into town, they're walking on the street and they're laughing, and they're doing what kids do. They're having fun. And the walkability aspect of Narberth really came and blossomed there. And when we open that bridge up, that's all going to go. It's gone. Because cars come tearing down Woodside from that hill, and it's really dangerous. And people walking into town, running for the train, they will have to look real carefully now. And I disagree that the bridge has got anything to do with the businesses having trouble in Narberth. I think keeping the whole area walkable is far more important than anything else.
Can I break call and ask you one quick question? Would you support traffic calming on the south side before the bridge opens to try to keep the speeds down?
May I please say something to that? I live at the corner of Woodside and South Narberth.
Are you on the list?
I am, it's coming
So you
up.
have,
All right, never mind.
I would love to, but.
Yeah.
Catherine Costa?
Yes, yes.
School One Woodside?
Yeah, so anyways, we've been in Narberth for 40 years and we moved before walkability and TOD was a thing. We really moved here because of that. We wanted to have a neighborhood and it's been wonderful. It's funny, one thing I remember is that when we moved, our taxes in Narberth were lower than the rest of Lower Merion. Now they happen to be higher. And I don't know, look, I don't have any scientific basis, but this is sort of my take on it. And, we have had development and I haven't seen my taxes go down with the new apartments and things. And I just feel like a lot of this is maybe driven by the developers wanting to make money. Frankly, that. This whole thing, we've always been transit oriented. That's who we are. And I like putting in, I don't know if these people that are in apartments, do you have a car?
I do.
I don't need to say.
No.
I didn't mean to be, I just do that. And like, the other thing I noticed over the years is the traffic is just unbelievable. Coming down Wynwood, it's just, it's horrible. People are horrible to one another. And like the more people that come, I think we're living a pipe dream or to think that people are not going to have a car. They will have a car. And I think we need to accommodate that. And I also think one of the other things is that, I heard like Jenny's Ice Cream, it's a great place, but their rent is like $6,500 or $7,500 a month. Now, how many people are going to be able to come and afford to put in a business with that kind of a rent? It's so, and one other last thing is that, the apartments, so we live at 201 Woodside, so, we're sort of across the block, kitty corner to 198 Elmwood. And I understand like that needs to be developed. But if you go across Narberth Avenue, there are apartment buildings there and they have this huge, big open green space. So there's the apartments and then they have almost like a yard that's shared and there's a wall going around. And people go out there with their dogs, people hang out there and it's part of their property. But I'm concerned if you go from a 4A or whatever it is to a 5A on the Elmwood property, which is going to allow like 90% lot coverage, that's no green space. That's just solid concrete. Whereas like, that apartment, and there's another one on the corner of, is it Marion and Narberth Avenue? There's like a really old apartment building. And that has some yard around it, has green space, not as much as the other one. So, I mean, I think that those are, you know, it's a different spot than downtown. Downtown, you know, it has been paved, but I think you need to think carefully about what you allow on those. It's a different story. It's not just, you can't just like do a spot zoning, 5A. I think that's thinking incorrectly.
Okay.
So that's it. Thank you.
Koski Feldman,
Yeah.
Forest Avenue.
Yeah, Amy Chakowski Feldman, 208 Forest Avenue. We moved to our small house, a very small house in Narberth, 33 years ago. We've raised 2 children here. And I want to note that that does make us relative newcomers to Narberth. And that when we moved here, there were still many families that were in multi-generational households. So yes, the population has dropped. We moved here for reasons that other people moved here, because the borough has sidewalks, because there were shops and restaurants and a post office and a movie theater and a wide selection of professional services. And we also greatly value the train and the bus service. And we know that that train and that bus service are part of what value our house has, the monetary value of our house, as it does for our neighbors. Also that we will lose those things unless we have more ridership. And if we have more ridership, we can have more frequent train service than we have now. We've always, we appreciate our neighbors and the range of housing in the borough that comes from the economic diversity that we have had in the borough, and that economic diversity is going away. When we moved to Narberth, there was no Amazon store to compete with our shops. There was still some multi-generation homes. There were fewer multi-car households, and there were fewer 4,000 square foot homes. If we embrace thoughtfully designed transit-oriented density near our train, we can get back to the density that we used to have. We can have more ridership. We can keep our train. And there are ways to do that that don't just involve a box that is 4 stories high. There are ways to organize things so that you don't have overlooks of one person staring into the next person's window. And we can ask developers to make modifications to their designs based on those goals and still increase our density right near our downtown, right near our shops. I'm not going to go through my list of ideas because I'm not a designer or an architect and time is limited, but I would say that none of the solutions that I would suggest are solutions that have to be adopted, but just that other municipalities have faced these same issues and the need to add density while preserving light and overlooks and avoiding overlooks and keeping the feel of their town. And some of them have done that beautifully, some of them. I applaud our planning commission for taking on these issues. I know it can be done successfully because I've seen it done in other places. If you go to Vancouver, you wouldn't imagine the difference in density that they have because it's been done so carefully and beautifully. Unlike Narberth, I strongly suspect that the people working on their planning commission actually get paid for what they do. But unlike Vancouver, Narberth doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. We can get copies of those planning documents from other municipalities that have done a beautiful job with this. And we can pick and choose from those documents those things that will work for our particular town. So what we have is a game of Jenga and a lot of laws that make a lot of things we wish could happen and we wish we could stop out of our control. But we do have some things within our control, and we have a lot of volunteers who are willing to try to solve those problems. And it is our job to bring those ideas to them and try to support them. It sounds, I'm also hearing as a last point, I'm hearing a lot of things that people are saying that make me think that
it would really help these processes if we could just have a list posted somewhere of those things that we actually get to do. Like say, oh, no, you can't buy this place, or you can only sell it to us. And those things that we can't do. Who can rent, who can't rent. So, and how to make those things happen.
Thank
So,
you.
thanks for all your work.
Yeah, 227 Hampton Avenue.
Hi, yeah, thanks. I'm here to support, transit-oriented development, and in particular, I think the Elmwood parcel, that of all the places in Narberth, right across from the train station is where we do need some density. Somebody mentioned, like, we don't want 5,000 people in Narberth. I want 5,000 people in Narberth. I want to get back to the 1950 population numbers. Because Narberth was kind of buzzing back then, and now on most weekdays, aside from First Friday, when everybody's out, most weekdays it's a little dead in downtown, and I can see why businesses are struggling. We need people as volunteers, we need people as firefighters, we need people to volunteer at all our hokey events that Emily listed. We need that. That's not a bad thing to have more people here, and again, it's also more ridership. I think what I admire here is, well, not only the work that you all put in, but I admire that the conversation here has been more thoughtful than it is on social media. Where it gets a lot of inflammatory language. There are a lot of falsehoods, honestly. And that some of that comes back to the communication piece, which somebody
transparency.
Somebody who mentioned, which, right, but I think the communication should also be about what private property is, because some people don't even understand that, like, the Elmwood parcel is private property, we can't make it apart. And there are a couple of things that I think get lost in the conversation. For example, it is, according to Pennsylvania case law, it's illegal to zone for no development.
What does that have to do with this proposal? We're required to adopt this proposal because of state law?
Because people are calling online for a moratorium.
Who cares?
On
You just said you don't care
I'm sorry,
about social media.
excuse me.
Excuse us.
You've insulted me online, don't need to talk to you. People have called for a moratorium on development. You can't actually legally have that, as you all know. But I'm not sure that everybody in Narberth knows that. Also, there's something called, variety of housing has to be zoned for. So you cannot zone for only single family housing in a municipality. It's actually illegal. So we do need to have apartments. And so we need to come at this
One
from
more warning, that's it.
the position of, we need to zone for apartments. Where is it best to put them? I personally think it's best to put them next to the train station and maybe not over on, I don't know, next to Marion Elementary, right? A little further from the train. Our whole town is walkable to the train. Anyway, I will just say one thing, which is that it's been shown in studies that more people show up to oppose a project than to speak in favor of it. And they've actually estimated that it's like 14% will show up in favor. And I think I'm one of that 14% tonight. So, because the people who don't show up are the people who are happy with the plan and who live here. They're also the future residents who haven't been here yet. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll leave it at that. I think it's more the reason why don't know about it show up, and you don't hear from them.
All right, we're gonna hear from Miriam
Shack out.
Say that again?
Shack out.
Knock out 518 South Narberth Avenue.
Hi, so I'm a new NERD. I was a NARD for 15 years and I actually served on the planning commission for, I don't know, God knows how long. I was pregnant, I had a baby rolling around on the floor and, you know, at that time, you know, I have to say I'm really excited to hear that there's at least a goal for both transit-oriented development and affordable housing. I've been a renter, now I'm a homeowner. My mom was a homeowner, and then she wanted to be a renter. She moved out here from Seattle, like many, you know, I have many people I know. So all of my friends practically in Narberth who are around my age, you know, 40, 50 something, our parents want to move near their grandkids, and they have a really hard time affording it. And so that happened to my mom. She has her Social Security income. It is limited. She was a social worker. She was not a high earner. She sold her house in Seattle and she could not afford to rent or to buy a condo. And we could not afford to find a house that could accommodate 3 adults in Narberth. And so we had to move it out of the borough. So I just want to say, first of all, just, you know, I think that it's, you know, like, I just think that sometimes we forget that people we love are renters. We have not hopefully, but probably been renters ourselves. I think that having renters and owners together in a community makes for a more vibrant community. You get, you know, more age diversity, you get people from more, you know, a variety of economic backgrounds. And I guess what I'm hearing, like, you know, I hear some people saying that they really just don't like the idea of having renters in the community, and I would really disagree with that. I also would say that many people are saying that they support the idea of affordability, and they're just skeptical that the current proposals will help with that. And I would just kind of, you know, want to say that, like, you know, I think it would be great for all the people who want to support affordability to really make that known and to, you know, support the discussions, you know, like many people have said, and I know this, you know, sitting on the planning commission.
Is there a 3-minute limit?
Yeah, she has 1 more minute, thank you. On the, sitting on the planning commission, I was, you know, I went on the planning commission because I wanted, you know, better businesses in the downtown. I was really frustrated that there was no coffee shop at that time. Now, things to get, we have this great coffee shop, yay, right? But there was so many, you know, public comment then, public comment from me, kind of like the chair of the commission. I came in and I was like, why do we have so many cleaners? Why is Rickland's going out of business? Why can't we keep the pharmacy? And it was not up to the planning commission or the borough council. They desperately wanted all those great businesses here. Not enough people either were around or chose to patronize them. And so, you know, we always went to the Narberth Pharmacy. We always went to all of Rickland's. You know, we paid a little more, right? But many people don't. So my point is just that I found out being on the planning commission, and let me tell you, I found it very boring. I'm sorry to delay. I found it very tedious. It was long nights. I get home at night and my husband, okay. Anyway, I just want to say that there's a lot of things that I think that we share that are not, like, we would have to have a dictatorship in order for the government to be in charge of it. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, you know, to just say that I think that it's really, really important for a vibrant community. You need diversity of income. You need diversity of, you know, people at different stages of life. I really wish that my son and my mom could afford to live in Narberth. Yes. It's a little hard for me to read. And so we have approximately 10 to 15 more people on the list. Okay. Including we have at least 3 hands raised online.
May I add my name to the list?
You may. There's a sheet right up here.
If we're going down the list, Carol Marie Scanlon, say.
It is Carol. Yes, that is it. Thank you.
I figured that's what it was. So I have a couple of topics. My first question is, what is this planning commission as well as Montgomery County Planning Commission's role in the subdivision, the development and possible sale of Sabine Park? Is that going to be rezoned to 5B? And the other question I have is, you talked about a grant to plan transportation on Montgomery Avenue. Does that include the development of Sabine Park or the sale of Sabine Park?
No. As far as I know, no. So the grant is for transportation infrastructure planning. But we think that, you know, that could include the streetscape design and thinking about how to create a more pedestrian oriented Montgomery Avenue, or more livable, you know, but it's mostly about traffic flow, and transportation. And then we haven't discussed, as a commission.
But you've seen the plan that
No, we haven't even seen it.
you haven't seen the plan that,
Well,
There's no plan.
well, but,
Can you correct that? There's no plan.
but.
what I'm saying is, I have no knowledge of any plan for, there's been nothing, we have no involvement with Woodline Park.
So the plan that council has drawn up for the appraisal or assessment of that
So
property is
what Tom
nothing?
is trying to suggest is that we can't help you with this topic. We have, unless somebody on the commission knows something, I don't know, we have no information to share. And I'm not sure if there is any information to share, but we cannot help you, so we would not.
All right, then my next topic is Narberth itself is a transit-oriented community. I live on Sabine, one of the farther streets, and I can make it to the train in 8 minutes. We are a transit-oriented community, and thinking that we're not, or trying to make us into one, is silly because we already are. This, the density is crazy. Now, it was, I think Betsy said, Tim Staub, I have his quote here. Affordable housing should be top priority. Narberth Planning Commission should review both subsidized housing and natural occurring approachable housing. While Narberth cannot swing a real estate market, we can become the beacon of what jurisdictions can do. So does that mean densifying, and will that be lowering our housing values? If we're packing people in, are we lowering our housing values? Just because someone wants to live in an area does not mean we have to build them a house. My husband and I wanted to buy a house in a particular area in a different state, and we waited, and we stopped the market, and we waited. And when one became available, we jumped on it and bought it, but we didn't expect this community to build me a house just because I wanted to live there. So, I mean, I think that's very short-sighted. And the other thing that you talk about affordability in Narberth and housing stock, if you look at the different houses that have sold, there are houses that have sold in the past year for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $2 million. But I mean, houses are all over the place. So we do have an interesting housing market. And that's what I'd like to just make sure that it is known. And population in Narberth in 2000 was 4,233. Population in Narberth for 2025 is 4,543, and that's from the Census Bureau. So we are growing. Do we need to get to, we'll never get to the 1950s because people are not having 7 kids.
Thank you. Judy Giuliani, 227 Woodbine.
Right, that's me, and I'll pass on my time.
Thank you. Bruce McKittrick, 501 Conway.
My wife and I have lived here for 45 years. My business has been here since 1991. I have total 5 people in my business. 4 of us live here. So we're kind of here and it's great. But I'm a landlord. I own multiple, I live up on Conway, like Beechwood houses, the Twins or row houses over on Hampton. I own a couple of those. I price the market. I'm actually below market. And it's inexorable. The real estate prices are going up. To try and bend that curve by adding 30, 50, 80, or 100 units isn't gonna cut it. I mean, that's just I've been doing that probably 15 or 18 years in the real estate business. And what I just think I don't agree with that. I'm below market for that reason. One of my employees, her building was sold. They're raising the rent and they gotta move. And the reason they moved here is so she could walk to work, and for her husband who took the train into town. So this is a dynamic for which I really don't think a single bullet isn't going to fix it. It's just complicated. And I don't know what the solution is, that's for sure. I have no advice, but I think going slowly, paying attention, gathering data, the suggestion of examining other potentially successful templates for this kind of circumstance, we're certainly not alone, would be extremely helpful. If it takes another year or 18 months, it takes 18 months, because once it's built, it's here. And behind us, we have two of those brand new 4,000 square foot houses who, you know, leave their lights on all night because they're worried about the security. Which, you know, because it's saying, put your lights on. It's just, it's kind of wacky. So there's a lot of dissonance in the community now. And I think just a little patience and see if there isn't, I think the core value sort of idea was a good one. Don, thank you.
It is over here. That's right, 117 Chestnut Avenue. When I look at the TOD, I really think of it from an environmental perspective. And if you go back and look at the climate action plan that we put out there back in 2020, was adopted by the council back in 2020. A lot of those issues can be addressed by the TOD. The greenhouse gas emissions, the majority of greenhouse gas emissions in Narberth, about 75% from transportation. A lot of it's the heating on, with the gas, building the homes. And I know we're looking to add green building codes, where we're getting rid of gas hookups and using electric hookups to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So those are just a couple ideas that I have that I think would make sense to move forward.
Harold Feldman, 210 Elmwood Avenue.
I'm actually online. I don't know if you want to wait for till you finish.
Since you're also on the list, so we will go ahead if you please with 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate the conversation and the opportunity. So I am Harold Feldman. My wife, who I think is in the room there, Annie Steinberg, and I have lived in Narberth for 40 years, 38 of which on the south side of Grove Place. We have over the years invested in a number of properties in Narberth and always have been, and I think have been successful in preserving traditional building styles and affordable living spaces in the buildings that we rent. They happen to include the buildings at 202, 204, 206, 208, and 210 Elmwood, which we fully renovated in 2023, and they house 10 2- and 3-bedroom apartment dwellings under the existing zoning regulations. And our properties, among others, are those that would be disproportionately affected by zoning changes that are now being considered specifically for 198 Elmwood, and my comments really focus on that. We listened to the full recording of the last planning session, a planning commission discussion in April. I have to say that it was quite difficult to understand whether the goals were really to create affordable housing or whether they were to increase the density of units at that specific location, 198 Elmwood, to be able to attract real estate developers, or for that matter, to increase the number of dwellers in Narberth. We've observed, and we're quite aware of the market in Narberth because of our own properties, that several of the new residential buildings, examples I think all know, such as the Elm, Narberth Square, and others, these are new construction projects that have not produced affordable housing. In fact, they have produced some of the highest cost rentals in the borough. And so we asked the question, does Narberth really need more high density luxury housing? And we think not. Now, in planning for any zoning changes to promote more flexibility for the developers of 198 Elmwood, we believe that the borough must assess the impact that such changes would have on adjacent properties such as ours and the homes on Woodside Avenue, for example, in terms of parking, traffic congestion and associated risks, rental income, visual attractiveness, property values. And these considerations don't seem to be a very prominent part of the Planning Commission's discussions, at least as we've heard them so far, which seem to extensively focus on the interests of the current owners of 198 Elmwood and potential developers. The problems, of course, of traffic density are compounded by the continued closure of the Narberth Avenue Bridge. Now, we wonder if there shouldn't be, and I know many people have commented on this, consideration of Narberth's acquiring 198 Elmwood to create green space. Currently, as I think most of us realize, there's very little on the south side. The Wynwood Road Elmwood Park development has very limited accessibility, can be dangerous for children as a site to access for play. And even the Marion Elementary schoolyard, which is not in Narberth per se, is now fenced off, limiting access for walkers. And it appears as though there is no other possibility now or in the future for green space on the south side. And finally, I'll say that it would seem as though before making final recommendations and decisions on the 198 Elmwood with respect to TOD housing, it would be wise to understand the fate of the regional rail system before the borough and council would ultimately act. So thank you very much for the time, and I will mute my microphone.
Hi, I'm Ann. Hi, everybody. I know some of you. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings right now. For those of you who don't know me, I live in the house adjacent to the lot where the church was. And I just want to put it out there, the irony, because I feel a little angry about it, I will admit, the irony of having more cars in the community if there were an apartment building there, when the original plan was to keep the structure and possibly have 4 or 5 cars. And I would like everyone to take a moment and think about that, because that could have been the case. Right. That could have been the case. And now we're looking at, and I'm in support of TOD, we're looking at a building, perhaps it's 3 or 4 stories high. I spent all day with middle schoolers. I'm trying to keep it. I love having light outside of my house now. I look at that pile of rocks and the bones that are left on the lot. It's not pretty, but that's my reality every day. It's better than looking at the fence that was there. It's better than looking at the dilapidated building. I love having the light. Would it be great to have an open space? Yes. It would. However, I don't think anybody in the room has $2 million to buy that piece of property, right? That said, I think would I like to have the property be open? Sure. I'm a gardener, all for native plants. But the reality is there are people in the world who need housing, and not everybody can afford a single family house. To your point, Miriam, I would love for my mother to live close by. She can't afford Narberth. She couldn't afford to buy her own home here. And it breaks my heart when I hear people talking about, well, why would we have just people who can rent? Not everyone who's a renter is here for just 6 months. People rent because they can't afford a house. They can't afford a $100,000 payment on a home. And so what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that I like what you shared, Miriam. I like what you shared, Rob, about the borough needing revenue. I think, yeah, there are a lot of things I would like to say. I'm feeling very impassioned right now. But I would like to ask a question because my phone is running out of battery and I can't access the document. So many people walk by my house and ask, what's happening with the church property? I don't, and people ask like I'm the lawyer or I own the property, and I don't. And it's been a long time and I'm tired of time. So please don't ask me anymore. What is the current situation? Does Jason still own it? Can anyone speak to that? Is the plan still the same on the borough website? Because I can't pull that right now. And then I'm done. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. The answer to your question, we don't, we can only tell you what we know, or what we've been told, I should say. So, the same landowner has owned it for a number of years. He also owns the building where the Royal Cafe was on Montgomery Avenue, and that's all I know, right? And he was, my understanding, he was gonna adaptively reuse the church for offices and I forget a few other things, but it's a mixed use redevelopment. And that was approved by council and vetoed by the mayor. And that, you know, just for context, it costs a lot of money to put together a development proposal. So you just, you know, sink the money into that and own the property and so on. So the borough blocked that plan, in part because people opposed it, or some people opposed it or whatever, right? But the church fell into disrepair and was ultimately torn down. He also had so the second plan was under the zoning, the previous zoning code was for a small apartment building with 20 units. And it did comply with the zoning sort of just barely, but that was permitted. And so he had a permit to build the building, but did not construct it. And the permits last, I think, 5 years. And if you don't renew it, that goes away. So that permit, as far as I know, is no longer active. The property, the rumor is the property has been marketed for sale. People are calling architects and so on to assess what they can build on it. And the scenario being floated would be 3 large single family homes. You can build fairly substantial large single family homes on that property under the base zoning. So part of the reason why we're looking at this is there any other land use besides 3 single family houses that, you know, might be possible to achieve? Because that's ultimately, again, it's private property, it's a private transaction, it's private development, but for example, if the zoning doesn't allow an economically viable project, you know, the 3 houses might be viable, and that might be what we get. So that's where we are. We are down to Michelle Condo, 150 Marion. Does that sound right? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have too much to say. I've appreciated hearing everybody's comments and glad to hear that we have so many shared interests. I too am very concerned about affordable housing. My mom, who was just here, is in the apartments at 401 South Narberth. There's not space for her in our house, and that is, I think, Narberth's premier affordable spot or location. But if the rent went up there, like, she would have to move far away, and so we're really concerned about that. But I also do see, you know, that the properties near the downtown, that if we are going to grow or allow growth, that it just makes no sense to put it there. And I think that this town could use more people, more shoppers, more commercial, more office spaces, more commercial locations to draw us on foot. So I do hope that the Planning Commission and the borough can work and organize or help or allow us to organize to think about planning tools, density bonuses or whatever have been proposed here to support more affordable units with that can come with new development, like, right, as I said, density bonuses, or there are other tools. So consider.
Thank you very much. Deborah Lawn Store, 128 Chestnut.
Yeah. You know, I'm listening to all the comments. I kind of feel like everybody has similar love and feeling for the benefits of Narberth, but different ways of supporting that. As far as the train goes, we don't know what's going to happen with Amtrak and SEPTA and SEPTA. And I don't think we should make any decisions about building heights or anything, building higher around the train station until we find out. Because, God forbid, if the train went away, then where would we be? We built things and we didn't have appropriate parking. I mean, that would be a disaster. I think we really need to slow down and just wait for that. We have a downtown on Harvard Avenue that is being completely redone, and there are plans for that. That's on its way. But it needs to be done. We can wait and see how that goes. I do not believe that adding an extra story on a few apartment buildings is going to save SEPTA. It's certainly not going to save the downtown. That's not. I think that's really not understanding the way things work. SEPTA is funded. It's inappropriately funded by the state. Okay, a few towns adding even a few hundred people is not going to save SEPTA. You probably know that. As far as 4 stories on a building, I have concerns about that because when you put that next to a house, and Adam, you posted an overhead picture of the elm, and it kind of dwarfs the house next to it. Mm-hmm. The elm is downtown. It kind of works. That 4th story, I think, is set back. I do not think that's appropriate for example, the Elmwood Avenue church property. It would overwhelm the neighborhood. It would certainly overwhelm the lady's house here that's just speaking. I just don't think that's a good idea, even if you set it back. It looks very nice in the drawings, but it's not appropriate for the small South Side residential area. Maybe it would be appropriate in some area on Montgomery Avenue. I don't know, but it's just not the right thing. We're not going to get affordable housing. I don't know how to do that. Land is expensive. Housing is expensive. When I was 40 years old, I could not afford to move to Narberth, so I didn't live in Narberth. I lived somewhere else, and that's just it's just a reality that it's sad for some, but I don't know that how we can regulate that. We really do have to look at who lives here already and protecting their home values and the things that they want to. I am perfectly happy to see more people in Narberth. That's great. But it's just accommodating. How do you do that when so many people have cars? They're going to have cars, period. I mean, some will have bikes. Maybe they can take the train if we can save it, but if it can be saved. But people have cars. Look at the Elm. And that whole parking lot is full. So I just think we should use some common sense. We're very idealistic about this, but in the end of the day, South Narberth is six little blocks, and I don't want to see a giant apartment building kind of just stuck there. We already have transit-oriented development here. We wrote the book on it. I mean, somebody invented that name, but we have it. The whole main line has it. So I guess my time is up anyway. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. If you're concerned about the number of cars in the borough and the amount of traffic, then I'm sure you share the terror of what would happen to us if we didn't have the train.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Horrible.
Michael Dillon, 28 Woodside Avenue.
Sorry, I've been in the hallway, sorry. I'm going to speak to everyone. Like Deborah said, I think everybody here obviously has a great love for Narberth, though perhaps different ways of showing it. And Emily started us off by talking about the people are what connect us, and I personally want to see a lot more people in Narberth. 5,000, maybe 6,000. I don't think Narberth is dense enough. It is not vibrant enough. I have small children. I live near Ann. I am on the south side. I do want to see a tall apartment building. See 5 stories, 6 stories, however high you want to go. Narberth is not vital enough. We are suffering from a lack of vitality at the moment. I have small children. I want them to live in a vital place, and we don't have that right now. And I'm sorry, but you can't do anything on the south side of Narberth without somebody complaining about it. We got a street light on my block last week, and the entire neighborhood is talking about this darn street light. Nobody is happy about the street light. So I just urge you, planning commission, yes, people are not happy about a street light. I live in South Narberth. We have to go inside Narberth. See what I mean? My point is being made. So I urge you push through the noise. There are many folks who have young children who can't be here because of the timing, who want to see a vital Narberth. And please, I urge you, we want as much vitality, as much density as you can give us. So thank you. I'm done.
We just we have a couple more names, and we're going to go online, and then we'll make sure we covered everybody. I do want to thank everyone that did come to put in. I know, as we just heard, not everyone is able to come to a public meeting, especially people that have other commitments in the evening. So I know everybody had something else they would have been doing today, right? Including myself, actually, but I do appreciate everyone putting in the time to and represent. So I've gone through all the names on the paper list. I have 2 hands on the screen. And then we can canvass the room again for anyone that has not yet spoken. Yes.
She signed and didn't get a chance to speak.
Yeah, and if you want to come up and sign the list, that will make sure that I check you off.
You
already signed it. What is your name?
Alexander King.
Is there another sheet? Is she on that sheet?
No.
Alexander, well, what is this? Is there, how many, show of hands if you are waiting, you're signing and have not spoken? Anyone else?
Maybe the skip, I don't know.
Okay, well, what was your name again?
It's Alexander Tank, A-L-E-X, for Alex. Alex Tank, T-Y-N-G. And I live at 117 Woodside. Okay, so I agree with a lot of what people are saying. I am all for continued development of Narberth. I don't want to stop development, but I don't want to see 4-story buildings out of place. We have, I think, 2 apartment buildings that I know of that are 4-story. One of them is outside the downtown and right outside on Forest, I guess I'm street, but anyway, the Elm. And I think it's too high. That's my impression. If I saw anything that was 4-story, it would be on the north side of Haverford Avenue, where they have 3 stories, but everything else is 3 stories. So I think what they've done already is high enough. That's my opinion. And I don't think the story, well, okay, let me start at the beginning here. Okay, so I have 2 big questions. One, why are you proposing these changes now? And I actually appreciate you bringing this up, the whole subject. Okay, so I think there's a good chance that SEPTA funding will be taken away. And I don't know for how long, maybe just during the current administration. But NTRAP funding is in danger too, and I'm sure you must know that too, because all the public transit rail system funding is being threatened. So there are meetings taking place now trying to figure out how to get that back. So from the federal government, and I'm not sure it can happen. And the Paoli-Thorndale route is on the chopping block, along with other major routes. And the other point is that increasing ridership will not affect whether SEPTA has to close that route or not. It is not relevant because it does not bring in significant revenue. Okay, and everybody needs to understand that. My husband worked for SEPTA for a few years. It operates mainly through federal and state funding, and both of those are threatened. So the future of this transportation is unknown, and I think we really need a rail system. I think we need a really strong rail system. We only have 2 cross-country rail systems in our country, a huge country, whereas Europe has a network of rail systems all over. You can get anywhere. So we do need more systems like that, and I hope that rail systems can multiply. So I think with the future of rail transportation in question, and it's very uncertain, it's ridiculous that we're ramping up the TOD zoning right now. I think we already had it. We've had it, and people have said this community has always been transit oriented because the train's been there, and it was built around the train and the people who worked for the train system. So, okay, so and that's one of the reasons why we moved here too.
The other thing is that.
Time's expired.
Oh, the time expired after. Thank you. Do you need one more, please?
He's
saying no.
Well, just trying to be fair. I have two hands online. I have Steve Phillips.
Hey everyone. My name is Steve Phillips. I'm a relatively new member of the Narberth community. I moved here about a year ago with my wife and 1.5-year-old son. And you know, when we were looking at our house, we saw kids playing in the street in South Narberth, and we really wanted to be a part of that. And you know, we've heard so much passion from everyone today, and there's just a couple of statistics that I want to share with you all, because if we think that we can solve affordable housing with an apartment complex, if we think we can solve the budgetary crisis around SEPTA with an apartment building, we're crazy, right? You can't solve societal issues with local solutions. Housing prices outside of Philadelphia have gone up 50% in the last 4 years. Rents have gone up 16% in the last 4 years. 80 years, we've had a lot of people talk about how great it was in the 1950s and in the 1980s, you could afford a home with 2 times the average household income. Now it's 9.5 times. The world that we had is gone, and an apartment complex won't fix it. Let's not gravitate to easy solutions because they're easy. When we give away this land to developers, we never get it back. When we give away this green space to developers, we never get it back, and we're taking it from our children. That's all I have to say.
Amen.
Thank you. Jim Waddington, if you're there, could you tell us your address, please?
Sure. So Jim Waddington, I live at 308 South Narberth Avenue. I live there with my wife and 2 kids and 1 on the way. I try to think about it from a pretty pragmatic and perspective of just thinking about from an incremental headcount, what are we talking about here, right? So if we add 100 units with 3 people in them, that's an additional 300 people. I agree with many others that have simply stated that adding more units or floors would suddenly help struggling businesses I think that's very misguided. I support the continued development of Narberth. I'm not opposed to, more apartments necessarily where it makes sense, particularly in the downtown area. But I think the leadership, both the borough and the planning commission, really need to focus on the businesses. We need to figure out ways to incentivize and draw unique and diverse businesses to the downtown. We need the leadership to work with businesses to partner with one another to support community events or other things. I just think that it starts with the businesses and things will kind of flourish from there. I would also obviously encourage all of the other residents. I know I support the local businesses on Haverford Ave, and we need to continue to support them. But I'm in the mindset of we need to focus on the businesses to figure out how we continue to draw. I don't think building an apartment complex or 2 in areas that don't really make sense is going to change any of that. That's all. Thank you.
Is there anyone else online that wishes to speak at this time? You could raise your hand in Zoom and we'll call on you. I don't see anybody else.
We have the one more that from the person that couldn't be here. That's very brief.
Which is that?
There's 7 letters.
Letters, but here.
This one, yes. So I will read this at your request into the record. And this is from Eleanor Tukoski Feldman. Who's your daughter?
Here's my daughter.
Yes.
And
So dear Planning Commission, my name is Eleanor Tukotsky Feldman, and I live here at 301 Windsor Avenue, Apartment A, Narberth, TA 19472. I'm writing to ask you to please consider a transit-based planning approach when making decisions for the borough. Allowing increased density around our public transit hubs will strengthen our town economically and demographically, and I am an example of why. I have lived in Narberth since I was 4 years old. 33 years later, I have been able to stay because the train and bus lines allow me easy access to the University of Pennsylvania where I work. I do not own a car, but even if I did, parking in that area of West Philadelphia is not cheap or easy, and I'd have to consider moving if I need to drive. Additionally, every time I go to or get off the train, I walk along Main Street and am incentivized to patronize the shops and boost our local economy. Strengthening our public transit strengthens our local economy and allows for younger people to move in and grow the area. Thank you for your time and consideration, Eleanor Tukotsky Feldman. I have actually, there are a number of other letters. Some of them are in opposition to development and many of them are in support of development, including 4 stories, which is an existing height in parts of town. Okay, that will conclude the, does everyone get a chance to speak that wanted to speak? So it is 9:17. I would like to close the public comment period. We do have, so let me tell you what was on the agenda for the rest of the meeting. Right, we had an update on the active transportation plan that was going to be given by Adam, correct?
Yes.
And then we have an update on the zoning code recodification project. That was going to be given by Commissioner Brexy. That is a neutral, no regulations would change. What that refers to is essentially reordering the zoning code to make it easier to read. Is enough. It wouldn't change the content, but it would be repassing the ordinance in a format that is easier to look at. And then we were going to talk about item 4 was transit-oriented development discussion and recommendations, which would be looking at TOD possibilities for Narberth as it relates to housing availability, any barriers in the existing or issues with the current that may restrict TOD, and therefore any adjustments that would be recommended to make TOD possible. So these meetings don't normally go past 10, which would be 3 hours, right? So we have about 40 minutes left. We won't have time to cover everything, I don't think, if we adjourn at 10. So what I could suggest, and if we wanted to stay with TOD, and since you're here, we could, Commissioner, we could consider skipping the active transportation plan and the zoning code for codification updates. And I think Adam, you have a presentation from MCPC on the model ordinance and things like just basically TOD zoning. This isn't necessarily a proposal for Narberth. It's basically information from the county about the sort of approach that some other communities may have taken, or a model ordinance is just a standardized ordinance that then you can tailor and custom to a particular municipality. But if you're interested in seeing that, we could consider that, and then we might not have enough time to really discuss much more before 10. So we'd have to pick this up again the next meeting. Or we might have to schedule a special meeting if we can't keep to the annual agenda without more minutes. So commissioners, what is the will of the commissioners? Should we, Todd, are you okay if we skip to the 4th item? So then what I will do is introduce Adam Chance is our county, relatively new county planning staff, and he has brought a presentation, I believe.
Yes, I have a presentation, and again, this is just to provide context on what's going on in the county to help, help us go through this, process. I don't know if it's easier for me to share or for you.
I think you should. Yeah.
Yeah, so what the county did in 2021, we looked at transit-oriented development, and we put together a model ordinance for municipalities within the county. So there's a whole guidebook online. It's 100 pages or so, just outlining background information, design best practices, and actual model ordinance language and things that you can consider when designing your own transit-oriented development ordinance. Now, transit-oriented development, obviously, Narberth, is transit-oriented. But when I'm talking about this term, I'm really looking at additional development, to enhance the transit-oriented nature of a place. And yeah, you can see our definition there, but it's capitalizing on the public transit access and also parcels that might be underdeveloped or not utilized. So it could be parking lots. If there's a lot of parking lots, it could be a building that's vacant or something of that nature. But the goal is to transform it into its best use. That kind of serves the community, it's located close to transit, so it can capitalize on that asset, because you guys have a real asset in the train station here. I'm really impressed with your education on this topic. You've gone over, a lot of the topics that I was going to discuss, but we will get into some nitty gritty down the road. But there's a reason for doing this. I mean, it adds population, and there are different concerns around adding population, but studies have shown that retailers are supported more when there's a higher population. Looking throughout the county, we've seen certain municipalities that have gained population do better, their retail do better when they've gained population. You can also look on a larger scale at, larger cities. The cities that have downtown populations are the ones that have been able to withstand the changes that happened due to the pandemic in terms of working from home and really support their local businesses. So I think it can help the downtown core and local retailers, and we say as much in this model ordinance. Obviously, increased transit ridership it can help with, but the biggest thing that we're talking about here today is increasing the supply of housing options. So we want to have different types of housing, more attainable housing, and increasing the supply can kind of level off how housing is increasing. I mean, housing is increasing in price across the county, and we really need to do something to address it. Now, one solution is not going to solve everything, but this is something that can help, like in adding housing and maybe a little bit of density here and there where it makes sense. We want to maintain the character. So this is why we're looking at this. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. So again, to provide context, so what other places in the Philadelphia area have enacted TOD ordinances or TOD plans? And this is from 2020, this is from DVRTC. But you can see along the transit lines, along the Paoli-Thorndale line, along the various lines, various municipalities have tried to encourage more density. One recent municipality that we've kind of supported with the TOD language and overlay is Ambler Borough. So that's just one example that we worked with to kind of help them model their ordinance. Go to the next slide. Okay, and so we took an approach where we looked at different places. Not every place is the same that has access to transit. So we identified different station typologies based on the type of place it is, how large the place is, how dense it is, how walkable. And we came up with these different typologies. So in no way, shape, or form is Narberth going to be, a Conshohocken or a Norristown, or even an Ardmore for that matter, even though we identified them as the same typology. We have different types of places, and you have to really adjust your ordinance language and the requirements based on the type of place that it is. So we really believe in that. You can see in the town center typology, we've got as small of a place as, is it Rockledge? Yeah, Rockledge. Yeah, Rockledge is one example of a very small place that we identified as a town center. with development potential, but it's a small place. So we identified them as a town center and then some larger places as well. So we are kind of coming at this as every place is unique and you have to tailor this ordinance. Next slide, please. Yeah, so again, just more on the town center, based on this typology, just highly walkable station areas, downtown centered around the train station. Buildings can be, around 3 stories, maybe a little bit higher, potentially. And there are infill development opportunities. And there's a lot of demand for these places. So Narberth fit in this town center typology for us. Slide. So when we're looking at design elements that we can affect with this ordinance, we're looking at land use mix, density, building design is a very important component, and of course parking. We definitely want to take a look at the parking and make sure there's a mix of land uses, and that buildings are designed to provide visual interests, so fit within the community. So let's get into some of the next slides where we actually look at the model ordinance and some of the use regulations. So with respect to Narberth, because definitely want to try to tailor it here. Apartments and mixed use are not necessarily permitted by right in certain places adjacent to the downtown. And there have been reasons for that, certainly. But it may be something that we want to take a look at, see if that would make sense, mainly in that, 4A area. Thus far, you do have certain conditional uses within the downtown area, for additional density, especially along Windsor Avenue. That's where the Elm came about, allowing for that 4th story. So that's with respect to building height and having bonus provisions for adding 1 story potentially. And then setbacks, a lot of the lots here are quite small. So setbacks can prevent a developer from potentially building an apartment building and making it pencil out. So these are just things that we can look at in a transit-oriented overlay to enhance the opportunity for a developer to build something that would work, an apartment complex, mixed use, or maybe it could be even, quadruplexes or triplexes or something like that. So yeah, so as I noted, right now you already do permit, mixed use in downtown up to 3 floors, and then Windsor Avenue, you permit apartment buildings by conditional use. One place that we were looking at, and I mentioned this already, it's just the 4A general urban limited, potentially allowing mixed use there. It's just an opportunity to add more housing potentially adjacent to the train station, transit-oriented development. That's that there. And this is where I think I may have scared some folks, so I apologize. Again, this was just our model ordinance. It wasn't tailored to, the left column is not tailored to Narberth.
But I just,
I apologize, that's my fault. Yeah, but really, I just wanted to do a comparison of what some other places are doing, the potential in Narberth, and then what's permitted currently. So again, in 4A, you see that, there's just not the ability to really build, additional storage. But downtown there is. So Windsor Avenue, we have different thoughts on the Elm. Maybe it could be set back more from the street on the 4th floor, but just a comparison for your knowledge. So then speaking of stepbacks, stepbacks can be really helpful in making the development fit in with the character of the neighborhood. So, we recommended, potentially a 12-foot setback. There are, or step back. Sometimes places will go for a little bit less than that, but there's some pictures throughout this presentation that will show how a development can really fit in the neighborhood with that 4th floor being stepped back. And then affordable housing has come up today. So you can make, a bonus provision to add affordable housing, have 10% of the units be affordable, and then that allow for a bonus to that for a story. So it might not be solving everything, but yeah.
Do you mind,
Yeah, you can.
Because this would be educational for me, if I have this correct, and then.
Sure.
If you think about it, so the term affordable housing is a technical term, I think, and when it applies to the federal government, and the federal government publishes for every county an index that is updated. And basically the idea is that for an apartment or a housing unit to be affordable, it should cost no more than 30% of the household's income.
Yes.
And then they calculate the median household income in that county. The median being halfway between the bottom and the top. And half the people are above it and half the people are below it. So the median income in Montgomery County, that's right, I would be, do you know what it is? It's 67, 68 for one person. I think
67 is close for a one person.
For a one bedroom unit, the household that if it was 80%, it was or maybe that's 80% of the median income. So
yeah,
they have different tiers. They have 3 tiers of really, really affordable, very affordable.
60%,
yeah,
80%,
and then 80% is affordable. So if you were making 80% of the median income, which I think is 67,000 for a one bedroom, you take that 67 times 0.8.
Yeah.
Then times that by 0.33, and that's your annual rent. That's how much you can't charge more than that, or the unit would no longer be classified as affordable. People obviously can pay more than 1/3 of their income sometimes, but that's a threshold. And then you would be designing your project. You would have to be able to build the building, and take out all of your debt, and be able to pay back the loan or whatever with the income from those apartments, and that's really the challenge. And so then what a lot of some projects would have some affordable units, and then they have market rate units.
Correct.
And we heard tonight from, for example, a landlord saying, we heard from several landlords, that one said, we're charging below market rate because market rate is way up here. And so that there sometimes is an opportunity to cross-subsidize from the expensive units to the less expensive units and carry them because they can't pay for themselves. And that sometimes that won't work. It really depends on where, actually, ironically, how high the rents are makes it more possible to cross-subsidize for lower rents. And then the concept in some cases is to only allow that density if a portion of the units are set aside and restricted to that income level that is the federal standard. And 80% is still a pretty high income in this county. It's 67,000 per household, but it's
56K.
Yeah.
That's 56K, rough figures. And you take 30 of that, you're looking at 17K, so you're in the range of $1,800 a month or something, $1,700 a month for a single person in a box.
Or for a couple maybe.
Yeah, I just pulled it. So the area that AMI for a family of 4 in Montgomery County as of June of 2024 was 154,000 for income. And so then the ratios of what is considered affordable would be 80% and under of that income rate. This chart only.
That's average. I think you said median.
Area median income is 154,700 as of June.
For what household size?
For a family of 4.
Yeah, so that is right. So as you add bedrooms, and I think for housing, they tie it to the number of bedrooms.
Number of income. It's number of bedrooms, but also number of adults with income.
Yeah, so if you're a single person household, it has to be a lower rent than a family.
So the example on the chart is a family of 1 with a 65% AMI would be a 70,000 income for the year, and their max rent would be $1,759.
So my head math was relatively close. That's just plus or minus. That's still some money, and you gotta pay the rest of your bills. So,
Well, if 30, the theory is that if you're only paying 30% for your housing, that leaves, 30% for taxes and 30% for everything else. Yeah, so,
healthcare, I mean.
yeah, groceries, everything. Transportation is a big part of it, utilities, so. Yeah, so, I mean.
I like that.
Just to understand, like, the term affordable in that context can have legal restrictions, and it's both high and low. It's actually really low if you're trying to develop something, and it's still relatively high if you're trying to make a living.
What are the other, you mentioned 65%? There are these tiers? What are the tiers and how do they apply and what kind of?
60% you see in some cases, but then you really have to be able to subsidize it with, though that's usually for a much larger development. That's a little bit more challenging probably in Narberth, given the lot sizes and how dense you're gonna go.
And you can start to compete for tax credits, low-income housing tax credits, which is essentially, it's kind of like a grant from the government, but it's very competitive, and that would help pay for the development to be built. And then I think there may be other types of subsidies you could pursue, but you need essentially some kind of funding because the rents are not going to cover the cost of the project as you go lower on the rent.
There are some subsidies at the county and state level for the above 60%. But developers have to, like, the funds come from the federal government to the state, and then the state distributes it, and then oftentimes they're distributed to the county, and then you compete at the county level for the funds to offset the rental differential. So if you have 5 units, you're trying to rent 80%, you might get funding from the county for those units to help offset the rent difference. But it's a trickle down process, so it's highly competitive.
A lot of people came and they made their comments and then they left, which is, I don't view as really fair because I have to stay. But it's like this. Do you know that? It's like the inspirational poster on your fourth grade classroom wall, and it's like the poem of like there's a man walking along the beach or a woman walking along the beach, and the storm has washed all the starfish onto the beach. And the person is walking along the beach and there's 1,000 starfish and they're reaching down and they're throwing starfish back in the ocean. And someone comes up to them and like, it's futile. You cannot make a difference. Look at all these starfish. You'll never make a difference. The person reaches down, picks up the starfish, throws it in the ocean, says, well, it made a difference to that one. So, I mean, we're not gonna, like, one parcel at a time, gonna solve, Americans' problems, but what can we control?
Well, I think it's good for everybody to hear the numbers though, and sort of the retail number when you think about what's affordable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my colleagues, I don't know where they're gonna go, but they're gonna go. They have to leave Narberth.
Yeah.
The ones that had their buildings.
What's pretty unbelievable is we've even seen recently, and this is in an adjacent county, Bucks County, an affordable housing development where they put the number at 100% of AMI. And it's still considered affordable housing because they are preserving that to them, because they're trying to preserve that they don't increase because costs are going up so much. And so that is considered an affordable housing development. Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable.
We also talked last time, it's like that the data may or may not show that older buildings rent cheaper, whether that's commercial or housing, for various reasons, right? Including just longevity of tenants on their old leases and stuff. But buildings they're not built old. They're built new and then they get to be old. So if we never build any new ones, we won't have any future old ones either, right? So not to.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So if older houses rent for less, or units rent for less, if you build more new units, then the units that you already have relative to the new units will, now you have more units. So if I go ahead and do the tiny 1-bedroom that I want to do in my place that's a block and a half from the train, and there's a big 4-story building with a whole bunch of fancy new units, the point at which the price point which I'm gonna set my rent is going to necessarily be a little less to be competitive, because I don't have a gym to offer my tenant. So is there not some effect on the market, even when you're building expensive units, that helps to make things more affordable? Is that a thing?
They're trying to study that right now. I mean, that's the big question, but you can see that supply definitely has an effect. You can see, again, might not be the best example, but in Philadelphia, they built, 4,000 or 5,000 units last year. And now these luxury apartments, they're having to give, 2-3 months free rent because there's just such a glut of supply. So it's just interesting, but it does show that supply and demand is a thing.
Our existing housing stock, where the apartments putting my thoughts together, that is a lot of our affordable rentals in the borough. And that was brought up years ago. But we're not protecting those properties or those units because we don't have a rental registration program. It's been brought up numerous times. So if you take a look at most of the rentals in Narberth that you would consider affordable, and based upon this calculation, we have a fair amount that are affordable. We don't know if they have smoke detectors. We don't know if they have fire extinguishers. This has been brought up numerous times. So if we're concerned about our affordable housing in the borough for people who are renting in the borough, we need to protect that housing stock.
Yeah.
If you look at above, you can't.
So we take the point. So we'll keep moving on. But and then one of the things that we might ask about is what do other municipalities have? And is there any opportunity if Lower Marion Township has something that we could pick back on? So I don't. This is something like it's been asked a couple of times, and that's not really a planning commission. I'll be honest, that's not a land use regulation topic. That's a commercial management topic, but I think it's fair enough to ask.
But it ties to it does tie to the conversation.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I just want to push back a tiny bit, right? Which is to say that because I don't disagree with the point you're trying to make. Safety is the most important thing and so on, right? But I just don't want people to use this idea that well, should we close all those apartments because they're not regulated enough? I mean, so that's where I think we need to look into what is really available to a community of this size and this resources to do as good as we can do, right? What opportunities could we avail ourselves of? And we, that's something for council to review.
Well, you can self-certify. I'm a landlord, right? So I can self-certify. I've been to other, traveling. I've been a renter at other places. And you can self-certify as a landlord that you're providing smoke detectors in every single room. You have a fire extinguisher
to meet code and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can, you don't have to send somebody in to inspect every single unit. You can have all the landlords. I mean, most of them should be paying some sort of business privilege tax on the rental income.
Right.
So I am mindful of time. There are two other things I want to cover, and because they came up a bunch tonight. So we'll go to the next slide, just on design standards. And again, this is just reiterating kind of that building step back. Granted that this isn't the best of renderings, but in the bottom right hand corner, you can see that, if you're a pedestrian on that street, you can't really see the top story. So it doesn't really feel any different at the street level from a 3-story building. So you can implement, building step backs as a requirement for these buildings, for this development. And then finally, this is a big topic, parking requirements. So that might be opening up a can of worms, but in TOD areas, parking minimums tend to be a little bit lower than other zoning areas in the municipality. This is because people are going to be using transit more frequently to get around, to get to work, these types of things. So it's something to look at. And another thing when it comes to parking, building parking in these new builds is really expensive. It adds to the expense for the developer. And I have kind of like a case study of a place that actually eliminated parking requirements, which I'm not suggesting here. Montgomery County, Maryland, and it's actually a place that's kind of akin to this. And they've got a lot of access to transit, but basically the county saw the need because housing prices were skyrocketing to get building around TOD zones, around these train stations. So they last year eliminated parking requirements. And the reason that I bring them up is one of the reasons they did so was because the expense for building a single parking space in one of these new developments was $70,000 to $90,000 per space. Now, I'm not suggesting it's that, maybe it's a little bit lower here, but it's expensive, and it is just translated onto from the developer onto those that are, either renting or purchasing these places. So it's just another consideration to think about in trying to keep costs low. And I know there are a lot of other examples of places that have reduced parking requirements, but I did see in your zoning code, and you brought this up last time, Adam, that you only require 0.5 space per unit for units under 550 square feet. So, the idea would be kind of potentially expanding that. Maybe it's not 0.5 spaces per unit, but maybe it's 0.7 spaces per unit. It's something for you guys to decide, because right now, I think the code says, one space per dwelling unit, which just, that requirement on developers just.
What it takes up, it means we can provide less housing. We provide more parking and less housing.
Yeah.
And so there's a place for your car, and there'll be fewer people. I'll just point out that, again, this may seem pie in the sky, but the state of Montana, big sky country, Yellowstone Ranch country kind of stuff, the state legislature just voted to eliminate parking requirements in any municipality, I think over 5,000 people, which is most of the municipalities. No parking requirements for any housing unit that is 1,200 square feet or less.
Yes,
that's correct. So like a 1 or a 2 bedroom apartment, there's no legal requirement to provide parking anymore. It was on the way to the governor. The governor has to sign it, but the governor had actually convened a committee, the governor's Republican. They came back with a slew of recommendations on affordable housing, and they're going through and they're passing them all, basically. They're raising the height limit. They are reducing, 6 stories downtowns. So downtown, 6 stories statewide. They have no passenger rail in Montana. They have no main line. They just have buses. They getting rid of parking. Now the really small towns, the more rural, like farm towns, it's half a space per unit. I think is the code. The new state, they will not allow you to have a more stringent standard than that as a municipality. And there's a number of other things, but it basically goes down to the price of housing is going up, and more people want to move to Montana and live in Montana, and then you want to keep your college kids from moving away and such. So again, I'm not sure it's a panacea, but the idea that we're somehow more car dependent than Montana. I mean, it's like
you're seeing that more than you.
Yeah, also, as a south sider, it seems like many have left, but there is not a parking problem on the south side of Harvard. There just isn't. I live on Woodside Avenue. There's ample parking. I mean, so to the extent that is being used as a cudgel against this, just walk around on the south side. There's space everywhere you move. I mean, there is ample parking.
Minneapolis is also, I think, one of the cities that's gotten rid of it. And the idea is that the developers will still provide parking because but they're going to set it based on what they need to do to make the project work, like including and then I do think it's fair to worry, even though there may not be a parking shortage, there could be a parking shortage it's a complicated topic, the amount of street parking. But I have a house, and I don't have a parking space on my lot, right? So I'm on Elmwood on the south of the train station is only parking on one side. South Harbor is no parking on either side. But so I have to park on the curb with my permit. So anyway.
So to not get my head bitten off here, but we did a study of this for the planning commission about 3 years ago on the internet about parking in TOD districts. And when we did it, the most recent data we could find was from about 2017. But what we basically found was that there were a number of places like Montgomery County, like Atlanta, like Minneapolis, that were zeroing out parking in TOD areas. But I think we have to their public transit, particularly in Maryland and Minneapolis, if you count the buses, is more robust than we have here. But aside from the zeroing out, what the Urban Land Institute found was that the trip generation, they studied trip generation in TOD areas. It was about 0.84, 0.85 trips. Or I guess what it meant was that the parking space needs about 0.84, 0.85 per unit. And so we looked at how much parking is actually being built in Norbert with the recent big developments, and that's exactly what it was. We were building about 0.85 spots per unit. So we were actually, as of 3 or 4 years ago, supplying just about the right amount of parking that TODs at that point. It was calibrated with the experience of what kind of parking was actually needed for TOD. And I don't know. I quickly looked. I couldn't find a whole lot of new data, and I assume it's all scrambled up now. It might be hard to track it, but our code wasn't that far off from what the experience was. What we did at that point is we made 2 changes in the code. One is in downtown, you used to be able to get a credit for on-street parking if you built an apartment building or residential, and we eliminated that because of businesses. We thought it was more important for the spaces to have turnover than implicitly to be used by apartment buildings. And so that would drive the number that provide up. And in response to people who came to meetings and expressed their thoughts, we also added a visitor parking requirement, which I think is now 1 spot per 10 units. So about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, our code was pretty much calibrated with what experience was in terms of parking in TOD areas, but we slightly increased the requirements, mostly to protect downtown businesses. And so that's what things stand today, and that's why they are the way they are. Just providing that background.
And in terms of zeroing out parking requirements in local areas, Phoenixville Borough is considered to be a success story for downtown revitalization, and they've zeroed out parking for selected streets in their downtowns, 4 streets in downtown.
For multifamily development or?
No, for a period.
So any type of development, yeah. So, I mean, if you're not familiar with Phoenixville, where they have the Firebird Festival, it's a former steel mill town, and it's on the railroad, but they don't have any service for now. Yeah. And so it's yeah. I mean, it right. It's not. It's like Montana, right? This is not New York City.
I should also add, we also, in downtown Norbert, we exempt for commercial uses, either offices or retail or restaurants. We exempt the first 2,500 square feet from parking requirements. That's again to help businesses. Businesses, if they move into Norbert, actually can't provide parking. They don't have any space in their land. So in effect, that rule encourages small businesses, because if your business is less than 2,500 square feet, you don't have to provide parking. If your business is 10,000 square feet, you got to provide a lot of parking, which means you're not coming to Norbert. So the parking in our TOD area, you may quibble with it, but it's actually been really thoughtfully calibrated to support small businesses, minimize the impact of increasing residential downtown on businesses, but at least in terms of our understanding of how TODs really work, not require more parking than is needed.
So what we were trying to do, so again, like we haven't had the chance to do that much yet. the borough is built out for the most part. There's not vacant land, but there is a chance in some cases to redevelop parcels from time to time. So that's what the Elm represents, right? There was a small office building there, and a parking lot. And then now we have whatever it is, 40 or 50 apartments, relatively high-end apartments. But, and the massing and the design of it, I believe the number of apartments is tied to the number of parking spaces that would fit in the single-story garage. So you basically, the way this development works is you count up how many parking spaces it is, and then you design a development to pay for the parking that fits, That's why they have relatively large units in that building as things go, and relatively high rents, and it all kind of works. But in many ways, the number of units is actually tied to the number of parking spaces. And then we still hear, is it too few parking spaces and so on, but, for my own self, right? I think the building blends in well, I think it adds value, adds taxes, and, it's a lot better than what was there. But there aren't that many opportunities to do things like that. We'd like to reposition, or I think it would make sense to think about repositioning, maybe some of Montgomery Avenue, right? The Rite Aid, I guess, is now gonna close, so the news says, right?
Yeah, I'm saying.
Yeah, so maybe we'll find a tenant for that, the owner will find a tenant, but. So on the south side of Narberth, the issue is that church site is not a huge site, but if you think about how big it is, it's roughly the same size as, say, the Albrecht's project is. So where the Albrecht's nursery is, that was where next to the Rite Aid, right? That's actually it's a 3-story building. Ground floor retail, taking advantage of the existing parking lot that was already there for Albrecht's. Ground floor retail, it's like a daycare center, it's the bank, and it's like a veterinary. And there's also, I think, a restaurant, right?
Yes.
So actually a whole wide range of businesses, and then upstairs is apartments, and it's a relatively boutique sized building. I think it's only like 16 or 18 units. But it's, that's about the size of the parcel that church represents. And but the whole program of that property, so you can slice it into 3 $2 million homes, right? You market, custom, beautiful, $2 million, brand new, 5-bedroom house. And you can put 3 of them on a lot, and we'll probably have 10, 12, 15 residents, of which a portion may be children, right? Or if.
And 20 cars.
Then, at most, it would probably be around 6 cars, right? And they would probably provide a driveway and off-street parking, and then some on-street parking. So I think that's a very real possibility that's what might happen. And it's not terrible, but it will be housing for 3 families of high income. Anyway, so and then the alternative is to try to provide, because you can only put an apartment building on a certain size parcel. You can put a house on a variety of parcel sizes, and you can build a house, a very small house to a very big house, right? You can do a lot with a single family house. You can do twins, but apartment buildings are going to need a certain size project to probably have anyone do them. But we'll see if we can do really small apartment buildings, but it's not likely. So we don't have very many opportunities like that. And so the question is, the whole project is probably driven by the parking lot, first and foremost. How many cars can I fit on the parcel? And how many cars does the borough make me provide to make my project happen? And if that number is the wrong number, do you walk away? It's just not gonna happen. Then the second, and then once I figured out the parking part, we have to figure out essentially how we pay for the project and get the number of units, the size of the units and all that. And that's what sort of, basically after we park the project with any number of parking spaces, we don't have this leftover space for this huge setback of yard. And I have a yard, and I spend all of my free time taking care of my freaking yard because it's really expensive to hire it out. I can't anyway. So I spend a lot of time trying to keep it up, and I probably should do better even, but and eventually it'll be amazing, you know, right at the time. Gonna kick the bucket, but so I really believe in the ecology personally, like, you know, that I'm really concerned about the insects, and the spraying I'm worried that maybe there aren't enough insects anymore. Because of all the people spraying for mosquitoes and stuff, right? But anyway, so the issue is the yard, there isn't enough space for the yard and the building and the parking. And of those three things, the one that, you know, we probably need the least is like 20 feet of grass, right? And maybe some shrubs. I do think we should have gardening, and we should have trees and all of that, but the question is, you know, can we, you know, make it work from a setbacks perspective? And then zoning does apply to the entire block, as was mentioned, and we heard from, I guess, some owners on that block. But it doesn't, you know, so they could potentially use the new zoning if they wanted to. And I'm really glad we actually heard from one of the homeowners that faces it. Directly across the street from the church is a 3-story apartment building on a cellar that's a half-story, right? So it's a 3.5-story building. They're relatively modest apartment buildings, and they are set back with essentially a big terraced yard. The parking is in the rear. I don't know if it's fully parked. It may be parked one per unit, or it may not be.
There's more.
Pardon?
There's more other garages.
Yeah, it has. There's small garages. Yeah, but it has a parking lot in the rear. It's because it's essentially an odd-shaped parcel. It's grandfathered in, but so that one may be better parked, or it may, I don't have the statistics. But what's also interesting is that one has a 12-foot driveway, or even it's like a narrow single driveway to get to that rear parking lot. So again, one of the zoning issues is how do we regulate the driveway to get to a parking lot? Because that site plan works in part because it has this small driveway to this rear lot. You know, if they were to do it today, they would have to move the buildings to make the driveway wider. Our current zoning actually would require 2 driveways for the same project today, because we currently require a one-way in and one-way out. And the intent is to not have a really wide driveway that you walk across with your kids, right? Because you're worried about cars turning across the sidewalk. And so we wanted to have small driveways for houses and apartment buildings. But as a practical matter, it can affect the site planning when we do that. And so the Elm is an example of a 2-way driveway, it's wide. I think I have a question whether we could have narrower driveways, but that's an example of a zoning tweak, right? A lot of this is really just, you can build an apartment building there now, but it may not be as good of one as you would like. And it may not be big enough in terms of the number of units to pencil, and the property owner may just walk away and build single-family homes. And that may be the pattern everywhere. In other cases in the borough, it may be not exactly the same issue, but where you would build single-family homes, but a similar issue of like, do we just get a 1-story Rite Aid, or do we put maybe housing above the Rite Aid? I don't have an opinion yet, but like, that's the kind of thing like where, you know, can we eke out around the edges a little more housing diversity, a little more affordability, right? You know, or this, you know, the Citizens Bank parking lot, right? This owned by the same developer that owns most of downtown. So, you know, what do we want to see happen on the parcels that could change? So that's really what we were going to talk about tonight. And truthfully, some of us might want to change the zoning code a little bit to make it more possible to add units. And then we want to have a discussion about should we recommend, we're just an advisory commission. Do we recommend to the council that we try to incentivize an affordability standard, like an actual standard of it should be this price to rent? Or do we think that might torpedo, you know, will that not, you know, what will work? Like what will people accept? What's acceptable to the commission? What's acceptable to the public, to the council? What's economically possible, right, to actually do? And then even if it's not possible right now, because interest rates are 6.5% or something right now, I think. And who knows what's going to happen this quarter and next quarter, right? But a lot of times what you'd be looking to do is have the developer for the property owner, entitle their project, get it ready, and then when the interest rates are lined up or the financing is available, they would execute, right? And I think the single family home thing is, I could be wrong, but I think it'll have legs. I think people will pay, and they'll buy the homes. And so we would get, we'll get the big fancy homes. And again, that's, there'll be homes. We just won't get as many. So that's really what the agenda was for this evening. Is there anyone else from the commission want to ask any questions on the model ordinance?
I'd like to make a suggestion about how to proceed.
Okay.
So, I mean, we've heard a lot from folks, all kinds of opinions and thoughts and sense of opportunity, sense of concern. I think it'd be really important to start for us to sort of at a very policy level, sort of affirm or not affirm why we do or don't think this is a good idea for the community. We can look at the comp plan, we can listen to what people said, we can think about our experiences, but I think it needs to start with a statement that defends a position to our community, whatever that position is. And then I think from that position would, for example, it turns out the planning commission is interested in transit area development, then I think, as you're trying to work out, what are some of the metrics we would need to work on to make that happen? Setbacks, parking, height. With or without the model ordinance, I think we know them pretty well here in Narberth because we've grappled with them. And how does it compare to what we have now? And what are the kind of geographic areas where we think this is appropriate? I kind of think we have to go through these steps so that the community is confident that we've done our homework. I mean, there's certain things I don't think you can study. For example, personally, I don't think by building a 30 unit building either, we're going to change the course of affordable housing in America. We need 1 million or 2 million units in America, right? And the housing market operates on both a regional, a national, and a micro level. And there's one building is not going to, but if there's a way to take steps in the right direction, personally, I would support that. So I think that, explaining that, defending that, whatever our position is the first step. And then talking about what are some of the metrics that we think need to be adjusted and where we think that's appropriate would be the next step. And obviously that block of Elmwood or that site in Elmwood is one site. I know there's potentially other sites too, or other areas of the borough. So I would suggest we kind of try to develop those things. I know you've begun work on those things, but I kind of feel like the justification part can't be skipped over. Because we're hearing from folks at the very least that there needs to be a coherent argument for whatever it is we recommend that we can defend. And then I think what falls from that is more of the just kind of the details. So I would think those would be good topics for when we meet next, whether it's a special meeting or in June.
I just wanted to offer a clarification too. This was only the second meeting in which Planning Commission broached the topic of a TOD. We started the conversation last month, and so the community outpour, right? People are paying attention, but we're still formulating our own thoughts and opinions, which is clear if you go back to the meeting from last month. I think someone commented that it was confusing to follow. That's because we're still learning ourselves. And as a commission, we spend a lot of time researching before we give an opinion. And so it's just that everyone is now chiming in at the start of that process instead of having the opportunity to even formulate our own research and background to present to everyone to have an education on the topic for everyone else as well.
Anything else? Well, so Todd, we'll take, basically, you know, the work ahead, then I think what it sounds like is to formulate what you call a position. It's really sort of the case, right? And what council asks us to do this, and, you know, why? And what do we think about it? And what are our findings, right? And what do our, you know, and then the big, further next step is sort of the recommendations piece. And, you know, what we had intended to do was to work around the borough, sort of place by place, zoning code district by district to assess, you know, whether that district, you know, was optimized for the goal or not, and then what would be the change, if anything. Starting with this one, because frankly, this is the parcel that was potentially in play, and it was now or never, basically, potentially. So that's what we would probably work on next month, or we might, I mean, do we want to try to have a bi-monthly meeting? Do you have an extra meeting?
Extra meetings. It's a good.
Well, this, I mean, I think that, you know, in order to make progress on this, I don't know if this room is free in 2 weeks. Are we free in 2 weeks? Like a special session?
I'm sure I probably get it from the proposed one.
I'm not available either. Yeah. But if one is,
Another thing we typically do, Adam, is we'll have a small group of us.
yes, we could have a committee, you're right, yes.
Who brings back the proposal to the rest of us, right? Like 3 people think like, yeah, I can draw decisions based on maybe another group of people who are gonna look at the actual, and we can bring them back to discussion.
Well, it might, if we have more than 3 too, we can always take 2 areas potentially.
Yeah.
Different areas.
So we could kind of do homework and bring it back.
Any volunteers to have a study group, study hall? I will volunteer. Plus 3, anyone else? No?
I mean, I think one example of that homework was the presentation we had today. That's, you know, again, bringing us all up to a level of base understanding of what TOD means and what it means to Narberth. And we have to let it sink in a little bit before we can really come to any conclusions. Right? I think we canvassed the Planning Commission what our priorities were several months ago. And to a person, we all said that our number 1 priority was the vitality of the downtown of Narberth. And almost all things that we think about are in service of that. And so, you know, we talk about a lot of different things because there's a lot of complex issues that go on with planning, but that's really the backbone of a lot of the decisions that we that we're directing our efforts to. But it's not really our charge. We don't hire or find owners to businesses. You know, we just want to encourage the right kind of environment so that it can work. So we've talked about it quite a bit.
I think, you know, we've talked about needing a Main Street manager type person to come in and help us with our downtown. We've developed a form zoning code that's already identified areas where we think higher density should or could occur. We know where those areas are. I think if we can fine tune the form zoning code to further identify specific addresses, streets, neighborhoods. I mean, Montgomery Avenue is an obvious one for taller development. You know, maybe we don't want to have 4 or 5 story buildings in the Haverford Avenue downtown. Maybe that's Montgomery Avenue. We already know that, yes, we are a walkable community. So, you know, I feel like we really just need to focus on how to fine tune the existing code that we have. We're not reinventing a form zoning code, we're just self-planning.
That's true. I do, and I don't know that we need to make a change or would recommend a change, but we might take up that I don't think apartments are allowed in any code.
Well, and I was gonna say that too.
As they are allowed, but it's a conditional use.
I was gonna say that too, designate where apartment buildings should be. I mean, we already have a big number of them across, and we have an apartment building across from the Elmwood site. I mean, to me, for that not to have been designated apartments was kind of short-sighted and kind of fell through the cracks. quite honestly.
Actually, we did, the original form-based code discussions included that kind of development like South Narberth Avenue, and the community turned out. And while the planning commission recommended it, council backed off of that recommendation.
The whole, yeah, but even just close to the tracks.
Right.
That property should have.
But we recommended that.
Yeah, I
to the
remember that,
council,
yeah.
council rejected that recommendation.
Yeah, yeah,
So, one of the 3 or 4 times.
yeah.
That's like.
Yeah, we also wanted to allow some commercial development in the base, the lower level of those buildings, and the Elm should never have been built without allowing commercial, having.
We changed the
having
code after
areas.
that to allow that.
Yeah, to have it, to hire.
Well, it's 10:17, so I think what we'll if you are all willing, we will put this on the agenda again for next month. And we'll try to be as transparent as possible, post all the materials in advance or whatever, but and leave time for comment. And then I think that to manage expectations, I mean, I know it's hard for people to come to public meetings. And the people in the audience only get 3 minutes, right? Like in a large format like this. So you spend a lot of time and you only get a little bit of the floor. But so I do thank everyone for participating, and we're just gonna have to bear with us. And I think we heard, I hope people were listening to, that there is a diversity of opinions, a diversity of perspectives. But I think we can appreciate that most of it is passion about, caring about the place that we live and trying to take care of it. So we have that in common. But if it's okay, we can take a motion to adjourn unless there's additional business.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
In the, somebody did comment that I've heard it from several people, that they don't know what's going on in our meeting.
Yeah.
And since we have someone from the borough staff here, could you somehow include in the newsletter summary points of what's going to be discussed? I don't know if everybody, you were thinking about, I don't know how many people actually get the newsletter. It's an email document usually, I guess.
Yeah, you can sign up on our website if you're not already, and it goes out every Friday.
And it would be great to just kind of, I mean, you'd have to know well enough ahead of time. It comes out every Friday, so I don't know if there's some way for us to, convey what hot topic that's
Usually
coming
our
up.
agendas are posted by then, so this would be.
It could be linked to it, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the question is there anything more than the agenda that is warranted to try to boost the signal a little bit? So it's not lost in the weeds.
Well, and it's the same thing with the bridge. I mean, you shouldn't have to be reporting on it, or people shouldn't have to be asking what's the status of it. I mean, it is in the newsletter. But, to be sort of.
And we need to post the newsletter more prominently.
Yes.
The physical.
I mean, there could be a paper copy. Yeah, I think we need, definitely.
That bridge has been explained in the newsletter many times.
When you were all considering the Haverford Avenue development, it was included in the newsletter. So maybe it's worth adding.
It was?
It was, yeah.
Town crier.
Okay, so we'll happy to follow up on additional ideas for engagement, and we'll work with Emily and Maggie and the borough staff to see if they have any. It's been great working. Maggie's relatively new to the borough, and it's been great. Maggie's really put a lot of effort into the planning commission and trying to facilitate, and Adam's also new, so we've got new people really with their shoulder to the wheel pushing hard. So really appreciate the work of the staff. We'll take a vote to adjourn now, if that's okay. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions, Todd?
Here.
Stand adjourned.